Chapter 475, The Heavenly Dao Alliance Leader's Speculation. The Qilin Chariot sets sail. It could be said that the current Chu Fan no longer feared the forces of the Central Region, because having Chuaning as a trump card in his hands was already enough. Following this, Chu Fan began waiting for the great battle 3 days later. After 3 days, he would lead these experts to the Tianxian Holy Land to seek justice for his elder brother. While Chu Fan was resting in the underworld, many people in the Central Region received news regarding the underworld. In the Heavenly Dao Alliance, the Tian Dao Alliance leader also frowned after receiving news from the underworld. The news he received this time concerned a peerless figure heading to the underworld, but more importantly, the Heavenly Dao Alliance also received news that the underworld was gathering those peerless experts. Although the Heavenly Dao Alliance rarely discovered the traces of the experts from the underworld, they were constantly observing some of them. However, the Heavenly Dao Alliance unexpectedly discovered that these masters from the underworld were continuously heading toward one location. Although the Heavenly Dao Alliance did not know where the masters of the underworld were going. Based on the continuous gathering of these masters from the underworld, it was clear that the operation the underworld was planning this time was not simple. It was probably related to the high-level figure of the underworld who had arrived. Thinking of this, the Tian Dao Alliance leader also began to ponder. What exactly could cause the masters of the underworld to gather together? And what is the identity of this high-level figure of the underworld? The Tian Dao Alliance leader looked at the sky with a hint of confusion in his eyes, feeling a sense of bewilderment. However, the Tian Dao Alliance leader was constantly guessing the ultimate goal of the underworld. Only by knowing the ultimate goal of the underworld could he have a way to respond. But no matter how much the Tian Dao Alliance leader guessed, he could not figure out the true purpose of the underworld. Unable to guess the purpose of the underworld, the Tian Dao Alliance leader could only helplessly wait for the underworld to make a move. However, the Tian Dao Alliance leader gathered all the experts of the Heavenly Dao Alliance together at this time. If the underworld truly made a move then, the Heavenly Dao Alliance would be prepared to react. However, only the Heavenly Dao Alliance knew about the underworld's operation. Others merely knew that a peerless master had arrived in the underworld. It was possible that this person was the master of the underworld. Thinking of this, many top forces began investigating the whereabouts of the underworld, but at this time, it was naturally impossible for them to find it. Time flowed slowly, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. During these few days, although the Central Region was guessing what kind of important figure had arrived in the underworld, after such a long time, they still had not guessed who this great figure was. Meanwhile, Chu Fan, who was in the underworld, gathered all of the underworld's top masters together. Because he had summoned the Shadow Legion this time, Chu Fan did not plan to use the underworld's assassins. Instead, he sent all of the underworld's assassins to search for his elder brother's whereabouts. He planned to lead the peerless experts summoned this time and the Shadow Legion to the Tianxian Holy Land. Besides this, he also brought the 4 great sword gods to the Tianxian Holy Land. These 4 great masters of the Tao of the Sword were the Sword God, the Sword Immortal Yi Guqing, the Sword Demon Dugu Qiubai, and finally, the Sword God Li Changgang. Their cultivation had all reached the late-stage Great Sage. Among the many masters, they were considered peak existences. Moreover, they were all masters of the Tao of the Sword, existing as invincible beings within the same realm. Subsequently, Chu Fan directly drove the Qilin war chariot toward the Tianxian Holy Land. Standing beside him were Chuaning, holding a war spear, and Fei Peng, holding the demon-suppressing sword, while the others were hidden in the shadows. Of course, besides these 2 peak experts, the 4 great masters of the Tao of the Sword were also guarding Chu Fan around the Qilin war chariot. Then, they were seen driving this Qilin war chariot across the sky. As this Qilin war chariot appeared before the world, everyone simultaneously turned their gaze toward the Qilin war chariot. Everyone raised their heads, looking at the golden light streaking across the sky. At the same time, many spies immediately transmitted the news back to their respective forces. Initially, they had been trying to find out the identity of this high-level figure of the underworld, but they never expected that this high-level figure of the underworld would now appear before everyone. Naturally, they wanted to investigate clearly who this high-level figure of the underworld was. As the Qilin war chariot slowly passed through the sky, soon, a golden light appeared across the entire sky. This golden light seemed to illuminate the entire sky. This made the golden Qilin war chariot seem as if it were traveling upon a golden Grand Dao. The speed of the Qilin war chariot was very fast, crossing a large expanse of the firmament in just a few breaths. Just as the Qilin war chariot was about to enter the territory of the next force, dozens of figures suddenly appeared in front of the Qilin war chariot. The auras emanating from their bodies had all reached the Saint King realm. A fervent gaze filled everyone's eyes as they looked at the Qilin war chariot before them. What was even more surprising was that among these figures, there were even great saint-level experts. The front is the territory of my Tianfeng Empire. May the person ahead please stop. Then, a great saint-level expert slowly stepped forward, speaking with a hint of helplessness in his eyes as he looked at the Qilin war chariot heading toward him. After his voice fell, the crowd behind him also turned their gazes toward the Qilin war chariot. Simultaneously, the aura on their bodies completely erupted. My master intends to pass through here. Anyone who dares to disagree must first answer to the long sword in my hand. Sword Immortal Yi Guqing slowly arrived in front of the Qilin war chariot and spoke to the cultivators ahead. After his words fell, a terrifying sword intent emanated from his body. It was as if the entire firmament could be severed by a single sword strike. After hearing Sword Immortal Yi Guqing's words, the great sage in front instantly showed a trace of anger. After all, their force also possessed quasi-emperor level experts, so Sword Immortal Yi Guqing was being too audacious. However, Sword Immortal Yi Guqing ignored these great sages and saint kings in front of him, because he saw the Qilin war chariot behind him continuing its journey. Sword Immortal Yi Guqing also knew that his master did not want to waste time. Thus, the precious sword in his hand was drawn out. A flash of sword light instantly streaked from his hand. In the next second, a sword light capable of destroying the entire firmament instantly erupted from Sword Immortal Yi Guqing's hand. The great sages and saint kings in front were instantly submerged by this terrifying sword light before they even had time to react. They were then directly repelled by this terrifying sword light. Having completed all this, Sword Immortal Yi Guqing released his aura as a warning. Afterward, he returned to the side of the Qilin war chariot. Chapter 476. The Qilin chariot swept across the central region, forcibly breaking open the gates of the heavenly profound Holy Land. Subsequently, the Qilin war chariot streaked across the sky and continued forward. As for the great saint level and saint king level cultivators who had blocked their way, they slowly stood up from ground. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they watched the Qilin war chariot disappear. They had not expected the Qilin war chariot to be so terrifying, and the cultivator, Sword Immortal, by the Qilin war chariot, was unexpectedly powerful. As for why they referred to Sword Immortal as a Sword Immortal, the main reason was that once one breaks through to the great saint level, their identity would be referred to as an immortal. A master of the sword would be called a Sword Immortal, which is also why Qing Feng Sword Saint was called Clear Wind Sword Immortal. Let's go back and report to your majesty. We cannot stop the experts from the underworld. Then, the great saint-level expert spoke with some helplessness to the great saints and saint kings beside him. After speaking, he instantly transformed into a streak of light and vanished from his spot. Meanwhile, the Qilin war chariot on the other side was constantly heading towards the Tianxian Holy Land. Of course, the Qilin war chariot passed through without any regard, flying directly over the heads of various forces. Therefore, naturally, some people intended to stop the Qilin war chariot. However, their strength was insufficient to stop the Qilin war chariot. They could only watch as the Qilin war chariot continuously swept over their heads. Among them, a great sage perfection realm expert emerged from a top-tier force to stop the Qilin war chariot. However, just a trace of qi emanating from Fei Peng was enough to send him flying back. This made that force realize that there was a quasi-emperor level expert guarding the Qilin war chariot. After this force spread the news throughout the entire central region, these forces in the central region no longer intended to continue blocking the Qilin war chariot. Instead, they curiously followed behind the Qilin war chariot. They also wanted to see the Qilin war chariot's ultimate destination this time. Thus, more and more cultivators followed behind the Qilin war chariot, continuously moving forward. And those top-tier forces, upon learning this news, also began to inquire about the Qilin war chariot's final destination. At the same time, many great saint level and saint king level and below experts continuously followed the Qilin war chariot forward. Of course, with Chu Fan deliberately slowing down, even cultivators in the entering saint realm could keep up with their pace. 2 days passed quickly. During these 2 days, the number of cultivators following behind Chu Fan and his group had reached hundreds of thousands. Moreover, their eyes were filled with shock because the Qilin war chariot was flying continuously and unhindered through the sky of the central region. Soon, the Qilin war chariot appeared over the territory of the Tianxian Holy Land. Just as everyone thought the Qilin war chariot would once again pass over the Tianxian Holy Land, they saw the Qilin war chariot's speed begin to slow down. At this moment, the Qilin war chariot directly set its target on the Holy Land position of the Tianxian Holy Land. All the experts who witnessed this scene looked at the Tianxian Holy Land with excitement in their eyes. At the same time, they also guessed the Qilin War Chariot's true purpose. They just didn't know the Qilin War Chariot's true target for this trip to the Tianxian Holy Land. As the Qilin War Chariot slowly arrived outside the Tianxian Holy Land's mountain gate, the Qilin War Chariot also slowly stopped at this moment, with several Qilin continuously roaring in the sky. Great Saint Realm Qi emanated from the Qilin. This caused the disciples of the Tianxian Holy Land at the mountain gate to be pressed to the ground. At this moment, the Holy Master, along with the Grand Elder and other elders inside the Tianxian Holy Land, also rushed towards the mountain gate. However, the Qilin War Chariot directly broke through the Tianxian Holy Land's mountain gate, and then, without any surprise, appeared directly in the Tianxian Holy Land's plaza. The Qilin War Chariot looked down at the Tianxian Holy Land with a condescending demeanor, and the four great sword Dao experts around the Qilin War Chariot also looked down with battle intent in their eyes. Who dares to intrude upon my Tianxian Holy Land like this? Do you truly believe there is no one in my Tianxian Holy Land? As the Qilin stood with a condescending gaze, looking down at the disciples and elders of the Tianxian Holy Land, a great saint-level Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land, at this moment, furiously stepped forward and spoke to the Qilin War Chariot. He had not expected anyone to dare provoke their Tianxian Holy Land in such a manner. One must know that their Tianxian Holy Land was considered a top-tier existence throughout the entire Central Region. Even the Heavenly Dao Alliance would not dare to provoke their Tianxian Holy Land like this. At the same time, streaks of light also appeared above the Tianxian Holy Land, their eyes filled with anger as they looked at the Qilin War Chariot before them. Even the disciples of the Tianxian Holy Land who were in seclusion had awakened from their seclusion. Everyone's gaze was directed towards the Qilin War Chariot in the sky. Even Xiao Zi, at this moment, walked out of her master's main hall, and her eyes held a trace of confusion as she looked at the Qilin War Chariot in the sky. However, for some unknown reason, Xiao Zi at this moment felt a strong desire to approach the Qilin War Chariot in the sky. At the same time, the Great Saint level and Saint King level and below cultivators who were following behind the Qilin War Chariot also stopped to watch the show. Although they now knew that the Qilin War Chariot's ultimate destination was the Tianxian Holy Land, they still did not know why the person inside the Qilin War Chariot wanted to come to the Tianxian Holy Land. My lord has come to the Tianxian Holy Land today, primarily for one matter: to execute the Xian family line of the Tianxian Holy Land. Upon hearing the words of the Tianxian Holy Land's Grand Elder, Sword Immortal slowly stepped out and spoke to the Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land. After speaking, the mid-stage Great Sage aura belonging to him completely erupted, and at the same time, the terrifying sword intent on him also burst forth without any restraint. His eyes were devoid of any ripples, as if he were speaking an ordinary sentence. However, his words caused the entire Tianxian Holy Land to tremble. Because the Xian family line of the Tianxian Holy Land possessed a quasi-emperor level old ancestor, they naturally did not expect anyone to be so audacious as to challenge their Xian family line in the Tianxian Holy Land. Presumptuous! How dare you insult my Xian family like this? You're truly seeking death. The Grand Elder of the Xian family also slowly stepped out at this moment, his eyes filled with anger as he looked at Sword Immortal and spoke. The cultivation of this Grand Elder of the Xian family had already reached the mid-stage Great Sage. Although he was not a match for Sword Immortal at this moment, he naturally stepped forward without any fear. Chapter 477 Chu Fan appears, the overbearing Chu Fan. Meanwhile, several other great saint-level experts of the Xian family also stood forward, looking angrily at the Qilin War Chariot ahead. As for the other Grand Elders within the Tianxian Holy Land, they looked at the Qilin War Chariot in the sky with some surprise. After glancing at the Qilin War Chariot, they turned their attention back to the Xian family lineage, wondering how the Xian family had managed to provoke the owner of the Qilin War Chariot. Hand over the Xian family lineage, or the Tianxian Holy Land will become an enemy of my underworld. Even facing so many great saint-level experts at this moment, Sword Immortal showed no fear. Instead, he slowly took another step forward. Then, without changing his mind in the slightest, he spoke to the Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land ahead. Having finished, he calmly waited for the Holy Lord's reply. Meanwhile, Sword God and the others completely released the aura belonging to the late-stage Great Sage on their bodies. Most importantly, the terrifying sword intent emanating from them directly enveloped the entire Holy Land. As the Sword Immortal's words fell, the Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land looked grimly at the Qilin War Chariot in the sky. However, when he looked at the four late-stage Great Sage experts beside the Qilin War Chariot, he helplessly turned his gaze toward the other Grand Elders. Furthermore, the owner inside the Qilin war chariot represented the underworld this time. If this matter was not clearly resolved, the Tianqian Holy Land might end up fighting the underworld. Although the Tianqian Holy Land did not fear the underworld's mysterious nature was something even the Tianqian Holy Land could not fully grasp. At that point, they would likely both suffer heavy losses. Grand Elder, how should we deal with the underworld? The Holy Lord of the Tianqian Holy Land then slowly turned his gaze toward the white-haired old man in front of him, who exuded a terrifying aura. Clearly, this old man's cultivation had reached the great sage perfection realm, making him the most formidable existence among all the Grand Elders of the Tianqian Holy Land. First, let us clarify exactly what happened between the underworld and the Xian family. The Grand Elder of the Tianqian Holy Land spoke slowly, maintaining his composure. Although there were only 4 great saint-level experts from the underworld before them, they were facing the entire underworld. What they needed to do now was first stabilize the situation with the underworld, and then determine what grievances existed between the underworld and the Tianqian Holy Land. We are unaware of how the Tianqian Holy Land provoked the underworld. Please, Your Excellency, clarify the situation. If it is truly the fault of the Tianqian Holy Land, then the Tianqian Holy Land is willing to compensate the underworld. The Holy Lord of the Tianqian Holy Land slowly stepped forward and calmly spoke toward the Qilin war chariot. His words were deeply meaningful. After speaking, he waited for the Qilin war chariot's response. Of course, it wasn't just the Holy Lord of the Tianqian Holy Land waiting for the reply of the owner inside the Qilin war chariot. The numerous cultivators who had followed behind also calmly directed their gaze toward the Qilin war chariot. They also wanted to know what grievances existed between the underworld and the Tianqian Holy Land. Chu Chun. Just as everyone focused their attention on the Qilin war chariot, 2 words calmly emerged from within it. However, this voice contained terrifying dominance, as if it were spoken by the most tyrannical figure between heaven and earth. Upon hearing this voice, the people of the Tianqian Holy Land stared at the Qilin war chariot in disbelief. Even the Holy Lord of the Tianqian Holy Land stared at the Qilin war chariot, utterly astonished. At the same time, he was speculating on the relationship between Chu Chun and the underworld. As for the Xian family, they looked grimly at the Qilin war chariot. Unlike them, when Xiao Zi heard this voice, her eyes filled with both disbelief and wild excitement. Although the voice was filled with dominance, Xiao Zi recognized its owner immediately. Thus, she stared unblinkingly at the Qilin war chariot. At the same time, Xiao Zi was wondering why the man she had been thinking of was connected to the underworld. However, she quickly grew worried. Although she did not know the relationship between Chu Fan and the underworld, challenging the entire Tianqian Holy Land would be difficult. After all, she was very clear about how powerful the Tianqian Holy Land was. The experts from the various forces who had followed the Qilin war chariot were also surprised upon hearing Chu Fan's words and looked toward the Tianqian Holy Land. They were also curious as to why the underworld would interfere in Chu Chen's affairs. Just as everyone watched in disbelief, a young man slowly walked out of the Qilin war chariot. He was dressed in a golden robe and possessed an extraordinary demeanor. The youth, whose face resembled that of a banished immortal, appeared before the crowd. He looked as if he were an immortal descending from the heavens. When the crowd saw this face, they all revealed expressions of disbelief. The experts from the other forces found it unbelievable because Chu Fan was simply too young in their eyes. Meanwhile, the Holy Lord of the Tianqian Holy Land and Xian Tian of the Xian family were filled with disbelief, as Chu Fan's face bore a 60% resemblance to Chu Chen's, leading them to form some conjectures. When Xiao Zi saw the face she had longed for day and night, her entire body began to tremble. At that moment, she wished she could fly out immediately and reunite with Chu Fan. However, at this moment, Chu Fan's voice slowly rang out. Although his words carried a hint of calm, everyone could detect the underlying anger. Chu Chun is my elder brother. Today, I have come to seek justice. I wonder if this reason is acceptable. As his words fell, Chu Fan slowly directed his gaze toward Xian Tian. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Xian Tian because he had obtained the information he wanted from the underworld. Therefore, he knew exactly what had happened to his elder brother. Chu Chun betrayed the Tianqian Holy Land. So how can your excellency claim to seek justice? The Holy Lord of the Tianqian Holy Land slowly stepped forward and spoke, though a hint of helplessness was visible on his face. He had never expected Chu Chun to have such a powerful backing. If he had known from the start that Chu Chun was backed by the underworld, how could the Holy Lord of the Tianqian Holy Land have chosen to issue a kill order against him? But since the deed was already done, the Holy Lord of the Tianqian Holy Land naturally had no intention of backing down. Do not speak of whether he betrayed the Tianxian Holy Land or not. Even if he did betray the Tianxian Holy Land, who can stop me from seeking revenge? Chu Fan scoffed upon hearing the Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land words. Then he spoke with extreme dominance while looking at the Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land. After speaking, he looked at the Xian family lineage with killing intent in his eyes. Chapter 478, The Shadow Legion appears, and the heavenly profound Holy Land submits. Since Chu Fan possessed the strength, he wouldn't bother debating who was right or wrong. Therefore, no matter what, he had to seek justice for his brother today. Otherwise, he would not hesitate, even if it meant wiping out the entire Tianxian Holy Land. Chu Fan's words completely shocked everyone present. They had not expected Chu Fan to utter such a statement. At the same time, the experts from the other major forces watched the Tianxian Holy Land with a gaze that suggested they were enjoying a show. After all, many forces had already guessed this outcome from the start. They just hadn't expected this former saint of the Tianxian Holy Land to possess such a powerful background. Moreover, this background was the current strongest force, the underworld, a force everyone listed as an entity not to be provoked, as no one truly knew how many experts resided within the underworld. Furthermore, the underworld experts Chu Fan had brought with him included 4 late-stage Great Sage existences alone. If the Tianxian Holy Land could not handle this matter properly today, they would likely face war with the underworld. Everyone who realized this looked expectantly toward the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land. At this moment, the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land was filled with intense anger. He hadn't expected the underworld to be provoked because of this incident. Although the Tianxian Holy Land was not afraid of the underworld right now, if they truly went to war, both the Tianxian Holy Land and the underworld would likely suffer devastating losses. This was something the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land and the others in the Tianxian Holy Land were unwilling to see. Thus, the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land looked angrily toward Xiantian. He hadn't expected this fellow to attract such major trouble from the underworld. However, the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land naturally wouldn't blame Xiantian at this moment. Their primary concern now was dealing with the people from the underworld in front of them. Your Excellency, are you not afraid of becoming complete enemies with my Tianxian Holy Land? The underworld's strength may not be weak, but my Tianxian Holy Land is not a pushover either. Immediately after, he slowly took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Chu Fan with a hint of threat. As he spoke, the chi of all the grand elders of the Tianxian Holy Land erupted completely. The dozen or so grand elders of the Tianxian Holy Land present had all reached the Great Saint Realm, so the moment their chi spread out, the entire sky became terrifying. Moreover, it was Chu Fan and his group who were invading the Tianxian Holy Land this time. Is the Tianxian Holy Land trying to compare numbers with this lord? When Chu Chun saw the grand elders of the Tianxian Holy Land below release the chi belonging to the Great Saint Realm, his face instantly showed a mix of amusement and anger. Then, he lightly beckoned toward the Void Realm. The next second, black figures appeared one after another behind Chu Fan. Moreover, the chi of these black figures had all reached the Great Saint Realm. As more and more black figures appeared, over 100 Great Saint Realm experts quickly materialized in the sky. They were precisely the Shadow Legion that Chu Fan had brought this time. Every single member of the Shadow Legion currently standing before everyone had already reached the Great Saint Realm. Some among them had even reached the Great Sage Perfection Realm. The moment the Shadow Legion appeared, the eyes of the crowd below and those watching the show instantly filled with disbelief. They had not expected the underworld to produce so many Great Saint-level experts at once. Moreover, apart from those at the Great Sage Perfection Realm, the vast majority were actually middle-stage Great Sage or even late-stage Great Sage experts. The faces of the experts from all the forces present were etched with shock upon realizing this. The Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land showed an even greater expression of disbelief. He had originally thought that although Chu Fan might hold a decent status in the underworld, it would still be difficult for Chu Fan to contend against the entire Tianxian Holy Land. But he hadn't expected Chu Fan to directly summon over 100 Great Saint-level experts from the underworld this time. If this was the case, war with the Tianxian Holy Land was not impossible. Realizing this, he began to reconsider his position. Since you wish to compare numbers with us, then my underworld is not afraid of any force. Chu Fan slowly spoke again, looking at the people of the Tianxian Holy Land before him. After his words fell, everyone's gaze turned toward him. At the same time, they all harbored certain conjectures. And the reality was exactly as these top experts had imagined. Chu Fan was seen waving his hand toward the Void Realm once more. The next second, black figures appeared in the sky again, one after another. Following this, tens of thousands of men in black appeared in the sky. The chi emanating from these men in black had all reached the saint realm, meaning every one of their cultivations was above the saint realm. Instantly, these men in black who had reached the saint realm and above filled the entire sky. The chi radiating from them immediately pressured the entire Tianxian Holy Land. The Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land stared at the sky, full of saint entry-level experts. The disbelief in his eyes completely erupted. He then slowly looked toward the several grand elders beside him. Clearly, he had not anticipated this scene unfolding. The grand elders around him also didn't know what to do at this moment, because even their Tianxian Holy Land could not produce so many saint entry-level experts. Although their Tianxian Holy Land could bring forth several thousand saint entry-level experts. But if they truly fought the underworld, perhaps the Tianxian Holy Land would face destruction. Even if the Tianxian Holy Land was not destroyed, the entire Tianxian Holy Land would likely be completely relegated to a first-rate force because of this great battle. May I ask your excellency how this matter can be resolved? Following this, a grand elder of the Tianxian Holy Land slowly stepped forward and conceded, his eyes still filled with anger as he looked toward the Xian family. This grand elder's strength had also reached the great sage perfection realm, so he was naturally qualified to speak these words. Hand over the Xian family lineage and give my brother justice. Although Chu Fan felt a bit disdainful after hearing the words of the Tianxian Holy Land's grand elder, he calmly held up 2 fingers. He then stated his demand directly. In reality, Chu Fan hadn't truly intended to go to war with the Tianxian Holy Land. After all, the Tianxian Holy Land had a history of producing great emperor-level experts, so who knew if there were any methods left behind by great emperor-level experts inside? Moreover, if a quasi-emperor-level expert forcefully revived a great emperor-level imperial weapon, this great battle might become quite difficult. Furthermore, the full extent of the underworld strength could not be completely exposed before everyone. Chapter 479: The appearance of a quasi-emperor from the Xian family, and the appearance of 2 quasi-emperors from the Shadow Legion. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land immediately fell silent. At the same time, a grim expression instantly appeared on his face. As a Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land, he naturally knew that the Xian family could not be touched, because the Xian family not only possessed Grand Elders at the Great Saint level, but they also had Quasi-Emperor level experts. Our Tianxian Holy Land will give Chu Chun justice and simultaneously hand over the mastermind behind this incident. I wonder what your excellency thinks of this. The Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land, after pondering for a moment, slowly turned his gaze toward Xiantian and the others, then slowly spoke again. However, after finishing his words, a look of helplessness also appeared on his face. Clearly, this was the greatest concession the Tianxian Holy Land could make. As for the others present, upon hearing the words of this great saint-level Grand Elder from the Tianxian Holy Land, they looked at the Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land with some disbelief. They had not expected the Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land to make such a large concession. One must know that the Tianxian Holy Land was considered a peak existence in the entire central region, yet now it had been forced to this extent. However, upon seeing the dense Shadow Legion in the sky, they instantly understood why the Tianxian Holy Land chose to yield. Down below, after seeing this scene, Xiao Zi also relaxed internally, as she had initially feared Chu Fan would be injured because of the Tianxian Holy Land. But after hearing her own Grand Elder's words, the worry in her heart slowly dissipated, and at the same time, she was deeply shocked by Chu Fan's status within the underworld. Xiao Zi naturally knew what kind of existence the underworld was, but she had not expected Chu Fan to be able to mobilize so many experts from within it. One must know that even the Tianxian Holy Land might not be able to mobilize so many experts. Of course, the main reason was that many experts of the Tianxian Holy Land were not currently within the Holy Land. For example, many cities within the territory of the Tianxian Holy Land required elders of the Tianxian Holy Land at the saint entry level to guard them. Meanwhile, Xiantian's face was currently filled with disbelief and shock. From the moment he first saw Chu Fan's face, he knew he had provoked someone he shouldn't have. However, at this moment, he was secretly cursing Chu Chun in his heart, as he hadn't expected Chu Chen's background to be so immense. If he had known this fellow's background was so great, he definitely wouldn't have made a move against him. However, at this moment, he could only place his hopes in the Holy Land. And Xiantian's father immediately used communication methods to contact his own old ancestor. After all, if the Holy Land truly agreed to hand over him and his son, then they would have no chance of survival. After all, the underworld had brought so many great saint-level experts this time. How could they possibly survive under the gaze of so many great saints? Before Chu Fan could answer, a terrifying aura erupted from within the Holy Land, followed immediately by an arrogant and aged voice slowly drifting out from the Holy Land's interior. This old man has not yet died. Who dares to judge my Xian family? As this arrogant and aged voice slowly spread, an extremely terrifying aura instantly burst forth from within the Holy Land. This aura had already far surpassed the great saint realm. After hearing these words, a shadow instantly fell over the face of the Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land. He hadn't expected such a sudden complication just as the matter was about to be resolved. At the same time, this Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land had originally intended to eliminate the Xian family's Grand Elder. Of course, the Xian family still had several great saint-level existences, but at this time, they did not hold the position of Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land. Following this, a black figure slowly appeared in the sky. In the next second, an old man whose skin clung to his bones appeared before the crowd. The old man emitted a faint death chi, and the aura emanating from his entire body reached a level that great saints could not compare to. The next second, a terrifying aura instantly burst forth from him, shaking the Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land and sending him flying. You cannot make decisions regarding my Xian family's affairs. He then coldly snorted at the Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land. After doing all this, he slowly turned his gaze towards Chu Fan, standing before him. At this moment, he did not put the Shadow Legion behind Chu Fan in his eyes at all. As a quasi-emperor level expert, he naturally wouldn't regard great saint level cultivators highly. The gap between the great saint level and the quasi-emperor realm was like a natural chasm, which was why he was so arrogant. The experts from the other major powers also became interested when they saw this scene. They hadn't expected today's events to have another twist. Initially, they thought this great battle would completely end due to the Tianxian Holy Land yielding. But they hadn't expected a quasi-emperor level expert of the Xian family to actually appear. Are you the one forcing my Xian family? Subsequently, the old ancestor of the Xian family directly questioned Chu Fan, his voice filled with terrifying pressure. Simultaneously, his gaze was filled with indifference, as if everyone before him was merely an ant. I didn't expect an old dog like you to appear. However, this young master does not like seeing people speak above this young master's head. Chu Fan hadn't expected a quasi-emperor level expert from the Tianxian Holy Land to appear this time. But at this moment, he was not afraid of this quasi-emperor of the Tianxian Holy Land. Instead, he spoke with a calm look in his eyes. As soon as his words fell, contempt instantly flashed in the eyes of this quasi-emperor of the Tianxian Holy Land. He hadn't expected the little brat in front of him to dare treat him with such disdain. Even the various masters present began to worry for Chu Fan at this moment. Xiao Zi even clasped her hands together and began to pray. But right at this moment, a man also wearing black robes suddenly walked out of the darkness. The aura emanating from this black-robed man had already reached the quasi-emperor level. Moreover, what was more important was that the moment this black-robed man appeared, another black-robed man also materialized beside him. Similarly, the aura emanating from this black-robed man had also reached the quasi-emperor realm. This meant that at this very instant, two quasi-emperor realm experts had appeared on Chu Fan's side. These two quasi-emperor realm experts were precisely the two deputy commanders of the Shadow Legion. Chu Fan did not summon all the other quasi-emperors. Instead, he directly summoned these two quasi-emperors. The moment these two quasi-emperors were summoned, they released a terrifying aura, and then two terrifying forces directly smashed the Xian family's quasi-emperor down from the sky. Everyone who witnessed this scene looked toward Chu Fan's direction with expressions of disbelief. Chapter 480. The alarm bells sound in the heavenly profound Holy Land, and the three quasi-emperors of the heavenly profound Holy Land emerge. They had not expected that Chu Fan actually had two experts of the quasi-emperor realm beside him. One must know that an expert of the quasi-emperor realm could become a top expert in the central region. Furthermore, many experts of the quasi-emperor realm rarely appeared in the world because their lifespans were limited. Naturally, the most astonished party at this moment was likely the Blood Rain Tower. They had not expected that Chu Fan's faction, the Underworld, actually possessed two experts of the quasi-emperor realm. Furthermore, the fact that these two experts of the quasi-emperor realm appeared so easily at the Tianxian Holy Land suggested that the Underworld must possess more experts of the quasi-emperor realm than just these two. A look of solemnity appeared on their faces upon realizing this. However, the most enraged person at this moment was probably the quasi-emperor of the Xian family. He glared angrily at Chu Fan in the sky. He had never expected that one day he would be knocked down by two people dispatched by a mere child. However, when he saw the two men in black beside Chu Fan, a look of solemnity appeared on his face. Clearly, he had completely realized that Chu Fan was not as simple as he had imagined. Yet, at this moment, he had no intention of admitting defeat. Instead, he glared furiously at Chu Fan in the sky. Simultaneously, he directly crushed a jade token he held. As the jade token in his hand was crushed, a long, drawn-out bell sound suddenly echoed from within the Tianxian Holy Land. The sound of the bell continuously spread throughout the entire Tianxian Holy Land. It even continued to propagate towards the surrounding areas. As soon as this bell sound ceased, the next one rang out again. Soon, the bell of the entire Tianxian Holy Land had rung exactly 9 times. The Grand Elder of the Tianxian Holy Land, who had just stepped forward, instantly turned pale upon hearing these bell sounds, then helplessly raised his head to look at Chu Fan in the sky. The 9 bell sounds of the Tianxian Holy Land represented the life and death of the Tianxian Holy Land. Ringing these 9 bells meant they would enter a state of final decisive battle. All Grand Elders and old ancestors would awaken from their slumber. Meanwhile, a hint of shock instantly appeared in the eyes of the top experts watching the spectacle from the outside. I didn't expect the Tianxian Holy Land to ring the 9 bell sounds. It looks like they intend to fight the underworld to the death. I didn't expect to witness such an explosive scene today. This time, either the underworld will be destroyed or the Tianxian Holy Land will be destroyed. Judging by the current situation, mutual destruction is likely the most probable outcome. Although the underworld has only revealed 2 experts of the Quasi-Emperor realm so far, who knows if there are other experts of the Quasi-Emperor realm within the underworld? It's a pity this is the Tianxian Holy Land's territory. Otherwise, I would still favor the underworld. The experts present began discussing the bell sounds rung by the Tianxian Holy Land. They naturally knew what the Tianxian Holy Land ringing this bell sound signified. The speed at which these bell sounds from the Tianxian Holy Land spread was also very rapid. Soon, all the top forces in the central region slowly turned their gaze toward the direction of the Tianxian Holy Land, although they did not know exactly what had occurred there. However, they had already guessed what was about to happen at the Tianxian Holy Land. Consequently, all the top experts looked toward the Tianxian Holy Land, and some experts were already rushing toward its location. They wanted to see what exactly had happened at the Tianxian Holy Land that forced them to ring the final alarm bell. Just as all the experts looked toward the Tianxian Holy Land, terrifying waves of qi also began to emanate from within the Holy Land itself. These terrifying qi quickly revived. The next second, figure after figure, accompanied by terrifying waves of qi, walked out from the back mountain of the Tianxian Holy Land. Subsequently, figure after figure appeared in the plaza of the Tianxian Holy Land. Instantly, 3 experts of the Quasi-Emperor level appeared. They ascended to the sky with a hint of confusion in their eyes. However, upon arriving in the sky, they immediately focused their gaze on Chu Fan and the others before them. Naturally, their gaze ultimately fell upon the 2 Quasi-Emperors standing before Chu Fan. Fellow Taoist, which faction do you represent, and why do you wish to be enemies with my Tianxian Holy Land? Then, the expert of the Quasi-Emperor late stage from the Tianxian Holy Land slowly looked at Chu Fan and spoke. He was also the strongest Quasi-Emperor currently present in the Tianxian Holy Land. However, his cultivation at the Quasi-Emperor late stage alone was enough to suppress everything. As for the other 2, one was at the Quasi-Emperor early stage, and the other was at the mid-stage Quasi-Emperor. This means that the Tianxian Holy Land currently possesses 2 Quasi-Emperors at the early stage, one at the middle stage, and one at the late stage. Chu Fan showed no shock when he saw the expert of the Quasi-Emperor late stage from the Tianxian Holy Land before him. Instead, he gazed calmly at the Quasi-Emperor of the Tianxian Holy Land. Today, this young master came here only to seek justice for my elder brother. Does the Tianxian Holy Land truly intend to wage war against my underworld? Naturally, Chu Fan did not choose to directly attack the Tianxian Holy Land at this moment. Instead, he slowly addressed the expert of the Quasi-Emperor late stage from the Tianxian Holy Land before him. After speaking, his gaze swept toward the Quasi-Emperor of the Xian family from the Tianxian Holy Land. Since he intended for the entire Xian family to be buried alongside his elder brother, this naturally included the Xian family's Quasi-Emperor. The Quasi-Emperor of the Tianxian Holy Land frowned upon hearing Chu Fan's words. Although he did not know the name Underworld, based on the 2 Quasi-Emperors beside Chu Fan and the Shadow Legion behind him, the Quasi-Emperor of the Tianxian Holy Land knew how powerful the Underworld was. Thus, he immediately looked at the Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land standing nearby. Clearly, he wanted to inquire about the details of this great conflict. At the same time, he also wanted to know why Chu Fan sought justice for his elder brother. The Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land walked out somewhat helplessly upon seeing this. He cupped his hands toward the Quasi-Emperor late-stage old ancestor of the Tianxian Holy Land before speaking respectfully. This young master's elder brother was a saint of my Tianxian Holy Land, and also a top prodigy of my Tianxian Holy Land. Moreover, he possessed the supreme bone, but an accident occurred during the Saint's Sun Challenge tournament. I do not know the specifics of what happened. At this moment, the Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land naturally did not speak up for Xian Tian, nor did he directly admit to Xian Tian's actions, even though they had already guessed what Xian Tian had done. But if the Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land were to admit it now, the Holy Lord, might perish right here. Although the Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land did not explain clearly, the Quasi-Emperor late-stage old ancestor of the Tianxian Holy Land naturally understood the situation. Thus, he slowly scanned the crowd of people from the Tianxian Holy Land present, and then slowly asked, "Who did it? Step out." His words carried terrifying pressure, causing all the disciples of the Tianxian Holy Land present to stare at their old ancestor in shock. Chapter 481: The Actions of the Heavenly Profound Holy Land Ancestor. An inevitable great battle. His voice was like a clap of thunder, directly resounding among the disciples of Tianxian Holy Land. At the same time, even the Grand Elder of the Xian family had a look of shock and unwillingness on his face. After all, according to their old ancestors' current actions, they would probably be completely handed over to the people of the underworld for disposal. Then, only death awaited them. Thinking of this, he instantly looked towards his old ancestor. The Xian family's old ancestor, at this moment, also had a gloomy expression as he looked at the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land. He hadn't expected the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land to make such a choice. However, he did not speak at this moment. Instead, he quietly waited for Xuantian's answer. Upon seeing that his father and old ancestor did not step forward to help him, Xuantian, trembling, stepped forward and looked at his old ancestor. At this moment, besides trembling, his eyes held more panic. He was afraid his old ancestor would hand him over to the people of the underworld for disposal. After all, no matter what, this person from the underworld was the younger brother of their Tianxian Holy Land's former saint. If he were handed over to this person, his fate would likely be worse than death. Reporting to old ancestor, Chu Fan killed a group of true disciples of my Tianxian Holy Land before escaping. It wasn't that I wanted to extract his supreme bone. However, how could Xuantian admit to his actions at this moment? He insisted that everything was Chu Chen's own doing. After speaking, he looked at Chu Fan in the sky with a hint of madness in his eyes. Although the underworld's strength indeed made him feel some fear, there were now 4 Quasi-Emperor level experts in their Tianxian Holy Land. Xuantian didn't believe Chu Fan could take him away from 4 Quasi-Emperor realm experts. After his words fell, everyone present frowned. Even those watching from a distance frowned as they looked at the people of Tianxian Holy Land. They didn't believe things were that simple. Upon hearing Xuantian's words, the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land revealed a cunning expression, then slowly raised his head to look at Chu Fan. "Since this matter is not the fault of my Tianxian Holy Land, then can your excellency please leave?" Then, his voice leisurely spread into everyone's ears. Although he had some suspicions in his heart for the reputation of Tianxian Holy Land, he naturally couldn't voice his suspicions. Moreover, Xuantian not admitting his mistake was the best outcome for their Tianxian Holy Land. Otherwise, which prodigies would dare to join their Tianxian Holy Land in the future? As for a great war with the underworld, he had no fear whatsoever. Although their Tianxian Holy Land currently only had 4 Quasi-Emperor realm experts, their foundation was far more than just these. After his words fell, everyone present was greatly shocked. They hadn't expected the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land to believe Xuantian's words so easily. However, many intelligent people instantly guessed the old ancestor's thoughts. Even the Grand Elder of the Xian family showed a smile on his face at this moment. Then, he leisurely cast his gaze toward Chu Fan. At this moment, his eyes held a hint of provocation. Clearly, he thought that the 4 Quasi-Emperor realm experts of Tianxian Holy Land could protect him. Good. If Tianxian Holy Land doesn't want to give this lord an explanation, then this lord will have to take it himself. Chu Fan hadn't expected Tianxian Holy Land to make such a choice. Initially, he thought the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land would nobly hand over the Xian family for him to deal with. But he hadn't expected the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land to only be concerned with the reputation of Tianxian Holy Land. Thus, Chu Fan decided he would no longer tolerate it. Although the number of experts around your excellency is not small, trying to shake my Tianxian Holy Land is simply wishful thinking. The Quasi-Emperor late-stage old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land slowly stepped forward again and spoke to Chu Fan, his eyes carrying a hint of disdain as he looked at the 2 deputy commanders of the Shadow Legion, who were in the Quasi-Emperor early stage, beside Chu Fan. Although Chu Fan had 2 deputy commanders of the Shadow Legion in the Quasi-Emperor early stage beside him, The Quasi-Emperor early stage was indeed nothing to their Tianqian Holy Land. Even he himself was a Quasi-Emperor late stage expert. The Holy Lord of the Holy Land of Tianqian Holy Land at this moment had a worried expression. Although his old ancestor didn't know how powerful the underworld truly was, as the controller of Tianqian Holy Land, he naturally knew how powerful the underworld truly was. One must know that the underworld's power was so great that even the Heavenly Dao Alliance didn't dare to provoke it. Although the Heavenly Dao Alliance currently didn't provoke the underworld mainly because it was confronting all the forces in the central region. But from this, one could feel how powerful the underworld was. However, the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of Tianqian Holy Land also didn't dare to step forward and dissuade his old ancestor. Otherwise, his position as Holy Lord would likely be over. As for the top experts from other top expert forces, they were watching Tianqian Holy Land with an expression of anticipating a good show. Initially, they thought this great war was about to end, but they hadn't expected the great war to have just begun. The old ancestor of Tianqian Holy Land actually chose to directly wage war against the entire underworld. It could even be said that the war between the underworld and Tianqian Holy Land would likely proceed because of this. Therefore, those top experts watching the good show also had a hint of anticipation in their eyes at this moment. If Tianqian Holy Land and the underworld both suffered heavy losses, then they could reap the benefits. Of course, the happiest at this moment was probably Blood Rain Tower. After all, the stronger the underworld, the greater the pressure on their Blood Rain Tower. But now, if the underworld and Tianqian Holy Land engaged in a war, then the most advantageous would naturally be their Blood Rain Tower. Upon seeing the disdain on the old ancestor's face, Chu Fan's face slowly showed a hint of anger. Then, he lightly traced his finger through the air. The next second, a terrifying power instantly emanated from him. The aura belonging to the Great Saint Realm was completely exposed before everyone. Everyone, who already felt Chu Fan was not simple, was greatly shocked at this moment. Although they didn't know how old Chu Fan was, they knew how old Chu Chun, the saint of Tianqian Holy Land, was. As Chu Chen's younger brother, Chu Fan's age was naturally less than Chu Chen's, but now he actually possessed the cultivation of the Great Saint Realm. Then, didn't that mean Chu Fan had the potential to break through to the Great Emperor Realm in the future? Chapter 482 Fei Peng and his group appear. The terrified crowd erupts in battle. Everyone who thought of this looked at Chu Fan with an expression of disbelief. The four strong experts at the quasi-emperor level from the Tianqian Holy Land revealed a hint of killing intent in their eyes. Since they had already offended Chu Fan, they naturally could not allow such a prodigy to continue living. Therefore, the four quasi-emperors looked at Chu Fan, their eyes filled with killing intent. Chu Fan, on the other hand, glanced contemptuously at the four quasi-emperors. Following this, he was seen waving his hand toward the Void Realm once more. In the next second, a terrifying rift began to appear in the Void Realm behind him. Then, three figures were seen slowly emerging from the Void Realm. Moreover, the chi emanating from these three figures already caused everyone present to feel suppressed. They even looked at the three figures with disbelief in their eyes. One figure was clad in silver armor, holding an emerald green immortal sword, and the chi emanating from him also astonished everyone present. The other person was dressed in black robes, holding a black longsword, and he seemed like a shadow within the darkness itself. His presence before the crowd made everyone feel as though he didn't exist. However, the quasi-emperor late stage chi belonging to him also caused everyone present to feel astonished. The third person was wearing a yellow robe, bearing a strange smile on his face, with a hint of wickedness constantly curling his lips. He looked like a demon or monster between heaven and earth. And the chi emanating from him also made everyone present feel incredible, because the chi emanating from his body had already reached the mid-stage quasi-emperor. The moment the three appeared, they immediately looked toward Chu Fan, and then they all cupped their hands toward him. Only then did they arrive in front of the four quasi-emperors of the Tianqian Holy Land, looking at the four quasi-emperors of the Tianqian Holy Land with contempt in their eyes. As for the four quasi-emperors of the Tianqian Holy Land, a look of horror appeared in their eyes. They could sense that the cultivation of these three newcomers far exceeded their imagination. Even the quasi-emperor, late-stage, old ancestor of the Tianqian Holy Land showed shock and dread in his eyes when looking at the silver-armored expert from the underworld. Because at this moment, he had already guessed what level of cultivation the silver-armored underworld expert had reached. At the same time, this quasi-emperor late-stage, old ancestor of the Tianqian Holy Land also began to regret his recent decision. After all, he had not expected the underworld to directly mobilize 5 strong experts at the quasi-emperor level. Furthermore, there was even an existence at the peak quasi-emperor realm, Such a strong expert could already annihilate an ordinary top-tier faction. Since the Tianxian Holy Land intends to fight the underworld, then show no mercy. Chu Fan looked at the old ancestors of the Tianxian Holy Land with contempt in his eyes, and then spoke without the slightest mercy to Fei Peng, who was in front of him. After speaking, he slowly returned to his Qilin war chariot. He immediately closed his eyes and began meditating. However, at this moment, he slowly opened his eyes and gazed toward Shao Zi within the Holy Land. When he first arrived at the Holy Land, he had already noticed Shao Zi, but since he had just wanted to avenge his brother, he hadn't kept his attention on Shao Zi. Bring the woman below here. Fearing that Shao Zi might be harmed, Chu Fan spoke directly to the commander of the Shadow Legion. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the commander of the Shadow Legion, who was about to act, instantly focused his gaze on Shao Zi, and then he was seen vanishing into the void realm in an instant. The next second, when he reappeared, he was already beside Shao Zi, and he immediately brought Shao Zi outside the Qilin war chariot. This scene naturally drew the attention of everyone present. Thus, everyone present was seen looking in the direction of the Qilin war chariot with puzzled expressions. However, neither Chu Fan nor Shao Zi spoke at this time, and Shao Zi slowly entered the Qilin war chariot with a hint of anticipation. Looking at the person she had yearned for, the longing in Shao Zi's eyes could no longer be suppressed. She immediately threw herself into Chu Fan's embrace. Chu Fan, without any surprise, held Shao Zi in his arms. Of course, to the outside world, this was merely a minor interlude. The commander of the Shadow Legion was seen waving his hand toward the Shadow Legion in the sky. Subsequently, the Shadow Legion in the sky charged directly toward the Tianxian Holy Land below. The leader of the Shadow Legion also directly charged toward the Quasi-Emperor late-stage strong expert of the Tianxian Holy Land in front of him. The Heavenly Demon Emperor and the other two Quasi-Emperors of the Shadow Legion also charged toward the Quasi-Emperors of the Tianxian Holy Land. As for Fei Peng, he stood beside the Golden War Chariot, protecting Chu Fan. Although he knew that there was also a strong expert guarding the Qilin War Chariot beside the Golden War Chariot, a strong expert whose cultivation was almost comparable to that of a strong expert at the Great Emperor realm. But at this moment, it was naturally impossible for him to leave the Qilin War Chariot. Moreover, Fei Peng could naturally sense that there was still some powerful qi within the Tianxian Holy Land. The qi of one of them was even not weaker than his. This was also the reason why he did not make a move. Subsequently, the great battle between the Tianxian Holy Land and the underworld officially began. Sword Immortal and the other four Sword Dao experts also directly faced the four strong experts at the Great Sage Perfection realm from the Tianxian Holy Land. Relying on the long swords in their hands, they were even fighting the four strong experts at the Great Sage Perfection realm of the Tianxian Holy Land without falling into a disadvantage. On the other side, the Quasi-Emperor late-stage old ancestor of the Tianxian Holy Land could only helplessly face the commander of the Shadow Legion. The commander of the Shadow Legion was a strong expert at the Quasi-Emperor late stage after all, and more importantly, he possessed an immortal and inextinguishable physique. At the same time, he was also very proficient in the Void Law. Therefore, he constantly moved through the Void Realm. This made the Quasi-Emperor late-stage old ancestor of the Tianxian Holy Land feel extremely helpless. However, no matter how helpless the Quasi-Emperor late-stage old ancestor of the Tianxian Holy Land felt at this moment, the thoughts in his heart had not changed in the slightest. At this moment, his gaze was still constantly looking toward the Qilin War Chariot. However, when he saw Fei Peng, who was clad in silver-white battle armor and holding a long sword outside the Qilin War Chariot, his face showed some helplessness. Because this Quasi-Emperor late-stage old ancestor of the Tianxian Holy Land had already guessed Fei Peng's true cultivation level. Therefore, he naturally felt helpless. How could he possibly kill the person being protected by a peak Quasi-Emperor realm expert? Moreover, being able to bring so many strong experts at the Quasi-Emperor level at once, Chu Fan's status in the underworld was probably not inferior to that of the Underworld Lord. Chapter 4, 83 Yuan Tua appears, the truth revealed. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Demon Emperor directly confronted the old ancestor of the Xian family from the Tianxian Holy Land. The Heavenly Demon Emperor's strength had already reached the mid-stage Quasi-Emperor, so it was not surprising that he was able to contend with this Xian family old ancestor, who was only in the Quasi-Emperor early stage. In fact, he was continuously suppressing this Xian family old ancestor in the Quasi-Emperor early stage. A terrifying battle thus unfolded. The number of great saint-level experts in the Tianxian Holy Land was fewer than those of the Netherworld, but fortunately, the Tianxian Holy Land currently had its mountain-protecting formation active. Therefore, all the cultivators of the Tianxian Holy Land who had not reached the entering saint realm were inside the Tianxian Holy Land. The ones fighting in the sky were all the cultivators of the Holy Land who were above the entering Saint Realm. At this moment, Xian Tian, inside the Tianxian Holy Land, watched the sky with eyes full of rage, while simultaneously beginning to ponder how to face this great battle. At the same time, Xian Tian's father in the sky was being besieged by the Netherworld due to his identity. Xian Tian's father's cultivation was originally only at the late-stage Great Sage, yet several assassins from the Shadow Legion were currently surrounding him. One of them had even reached the Great Sage Perfection realm. Therefore, Xian Tian's father was in a miserable state. In just a moment, he was beaten until he was covered in wounds. Numerous scars appeared on his body. His eyes were filled with terror as he looked at the group of great saint-level experts from the Shadow Legion in front of him who had severely injured him. Of course, he also knew why he was being targeted. Immediately afterward, a terrifying power erupted from Xian Tian's father, and he shot out like a spring. Most importantly, the aura emanating from him had reached the Great Sage Perfection realm. However, it could be seen that the chi on his body was constantly burning. Clearly, he had used a secret technique to raise his cultivation to the Great Sage Perfection realm. But how could the Shadow Legion possibly let him go? Immediately, a Great Sage Perfection realm expert from the Shadow Legion appeared in front of Xian Tian's father, blocking him. Then, the Great Sage Perfection realm expert from the Shadow Legion thrust the long spear in his hand directly toward Xian Tian's father. The terrifying power directly pierced through the entire Void Realm. Without the slightest hesitation, it immediately stabbed through Xian Tian's father's arm. In the next second, Xian Tian's father's entire arm was instantly severed by that long spear. Moreover, the attacks of the other Great Saint realm experts from the Shadow Legion also landed on Xian Tian's father. Immediately afterward, Xian Tian's father's hands and feet were instantly chopped off. At this moment, his eyes held a hint of misery and sorrow. However, the Great Saint realm experts of the Shadow Legion did not kill him. Instead, they directly brought him outside the Qilin War Chariot. Then, a person slowly emerged in the Void Realm, radiating a terrifying aura. Most importantly, this person wore a golden mask and a golden battle armor. The aura belonging to the Great Sage Perfection realm completely suppressed Xian Tian's father. Of course, the Great Sage Perfection realm aura on him was not entirely stable, as if he could break through to a higher realm at any moment. This person was none other than Yuan Tuo. He had been cultivating inside the Time Pagoda during this period. Therefore, he was not far from the Quasi-Emperor realm. As for why he appeared here, the main reason was that he wanted to search the soul. Since Yuan Tuo was the reincarnation of the Kunlun mirror, he could naturally search for information within these souls. He instantly placed his right hand on Xian Tian's father's head. Subsequently, all of Xian Tian's father's memories, like scenes, were instantly transmitted into Yuan Tuo's mind. The details of how they planned to assassinate Chu Chun and seize his supreme bone also instantly appeared in Yuan Tuo's mind. After completing this, Yuan Tuo looked at Xian Tian's father with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. After all, Yuan Tuo was a person of the Great Xia Dynasty, and the person targeted for assassination was their Great Xia Dynasty's eldest young master. So how could he not harbor hatred for the person before him? When the people of the Tianxian Holy Land saw this scene, an ominous premonition instantly arose in their hearts. Although they had always insisted that there was no news of the Holy Land stealing someone else's supreme bone. However, the Netherworld side had already performed the soul search. This meant that the matter would likely be exposed today. Thus, even the Quasi-Emperor level old ancestors of the Holy Land had expressions of helplessness and fury on their faces. However, at this moment, they could only rage helplessly. Meanwhile, the experts from the other peak forces watching the battle outside curiously looked toward Yuan Tuo. At the same time, they also had some conjectures in their hearts. At this moment, Yuan Tuo cupped his hands toward Chu Fan inside the Qilin War Chariot. Following that, he waved his hand toward the sky. In the next second, a fiery red light screen instantly appeared in the sky. The figures of Xian Tian and Xian Tian's father immediately appeared within this fiery red light screen. At this time, they were inside a great hall. Many disciples of the Tianxian Holy Land instantly recognized the location of this great hall. The figures of Xian Tian and his father in the fiery red light screen then slowly began to move. Xian Tian was seen respectfully cupping his hands toward his father. Then, with anticipation in his eyes, he asked his father, "Father, what will happen if the Holy Land finds out about this matter?" Xian Tian's eyes held both anticipation and worry. Clearly, although he desired the Supreme Bone, he was also worried that the news of the Supreme Bone would be known by the Holy Land. "Do you think the Holy Land would offend our lineage for the sake of a prodigy who lost his Supreme Bone?" Furthermore, this time we aren't just digging out his supreme bone. We're going to ensure he is completely ruined in the Saint's Son Challenge tournament. Xian Tian's father spoke with a hint of viciousness on his face, and after finishing, he looked at his son with conviction in his eyes. Subsequently, Xian Tian and Xian Tian's father in the scene began discussing how to deal with the Supreme Bone, and all the details of their conspiracy that day appeared in the light screen. After seeing this scene, Xian Tian completely collapsed onto the ground, because he knew that everything was over. Not only had they failed to extract the Supreme Bone, but because of the Supreme Bone, they had completely pushed their entire Xian family into the abyss. And the thing that ruined the entire Xian family was his greed. Thinking of this, all the light in Xian Tian's eyes vanished. Chapter 484 exposes the Xian family. Purple Longsword shakes the battlefield. At this moment, it wasn't just Xian Tian whose eyes had lost their luster. Even the quasi-emperor level expert of the Xian family carried a hint of helplessness in his eyes. Although it was possible he wouldn't fall into the hands of the underworld. Once this matter came out, their Xian family would be completely nailed to the pillar of shame. At the same time, it would become even more difficult for the Xian family to rise again in the Tianxian Holy Land. Even the entire Central Domain would mock them. Meanwhile, the disciples of the Tianxian Holy Land were looking at the scene in the sky with great shock. They never imagined that their own saint was truly framed by the Xian family, and that he was framed precisely because he possessed the Supreme Bone. At this moment, they looked at their Holy Lord of the Holy Land with disbelief in their eyes. We never thought we were the ones slandering the saint. It turns out Xian Tian framed the saint. We truly owe the saint for his kindness to us. It's all Xuan Tian's fault. If it weren't for him, how could we have wrongly accused the saint? What good is saying this now? The saint's Supreme Bone has already been destroyed, and we don't even know the saint's whereabouts. If the truth of the matter is like this, why should our Tianxian Holy Land stand up for the Xian family and resist the underworld's revenge? This matter has nothing to do with us. We should join forces with the underworld to eliminate the Xian family. The disciples of the Tianxian Holy Land had now also come to their senses. Thus, a group of Tianxian Holy Land disciples and elders looked unkindly toward the members of the Xian family. At the same time, some people felt they had wronged the previous saint, Chu Chun, while others felt the Xian family deserved punishment. They should not follow the Xian family in resisting the underworld. Moreover, the underworld's strength was so formidable now that even if they fought them, they might not stand a chance. Therefore, the disciples and elders of the Tianxian Holy Land were all starting to waver. Even the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land, who had already guessed the outcome, was looking at the battle in the sky with uncertainty. At this moment, he had completely understood the details of the incident. Of course, he had mostly guessed the result from the beginning, but he hadn't expected the outcome to be even more cruel than he imagined. Meanwhile, the factions watching the show looked upon the battle between the Tianxian Holy Land and the underworld with eyes eager for drama. Furthermore, when they learned the details of the incident, many experts looked at the Tianxian Holy Land with disdain. After all, the Tianxian Holy Land had committed such an act and refused to admit it. From this, they could gauge just how hypocritical the Tianxian Holy Land truly was. We never thought the Tianxian Holy Land would do something so contrary to heavenly Dao. Moreover, the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land issued a kill order against their saint without even investigating. Perhaps this Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land was involved too. Even if he wasn't involved, he probably guessed the outcome. He just didn't dare to vouch for that saint, because he feared the Xian family. That saint of the Tianxian Holy Land is truly pitiful. He was slandered, and the Holy Lord of the Holy Land didn't even dare to come out and vouch for him. From now on, perhaps no one will dare to become the saint of the Tianxian Holy Land anymore. If one wants to become the saint of the Tianxian Holy Land, the first thing they must determine is whether the power behind them is strong enough. If that saint didn't have a power as strong as the underworld backing him, perhaps the truth wouldn't have been revealed to everyone. The group of experts also began discussing among themselves. However, their eyes now held pity for that saint. They had not expected the saint of the Tianxian Holy Land to be so wretched. At the same time, some people speculated whether the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land was involved in this matter. If the Holy Lord of the Holy Land of the Tianxian Holy Land was involved in this incident, then the Tianxian Holy Land was utterly rotten. Concurrently, many top factions began mocking the Tianxian Holy Land. Originally, the Tianxian Holy Land was considered a peak existence in the entire Central Domain. But even so, they had rival forces. At this time, their rival forces naturally chose to kick them while they were down, and others nodded in agreement after hearing the words of these factions. Of course, when the disciples and elders of the Tianxian Holy Land heard the words of these powerful factions, a hint of desolation appeared in their eyes. If things truly were as these experts speculated, then was there really any need for them to stay in the Tianxian Holy Land? Thus, the disciples and elders of the Tianxian Holy Land silently looked toward the underworld forces in the sky. Meanwhile, the underworld's offensive against the Tianxian Holy Land became increasingly terrifying, and 3 great saint-level experts from the Tianxian Holy Land had already fallen. Furthermore, all 3 of these were great saint-level experts from the Xian family. Chu Fan had naturally finished comforting Xiao Zi at this time. He was seen slowly leading Xiao Zi out from inside the Qilin war chariot. His eyes were calm as he watched the battle in the sky. At this moment, the underworld side had completely gained the upper hand in the battle in the sky. It could even be said that as the battle continued, many great saint-level and even quasi-emperor realm experts of the Tianxian Holy Land would likely perish. Just as the battle continued, a terrifying purple light was heard flashing across the sky. The next second, a purple long saber instantly appeared in the middle of the battlefield. The moment this purple long saber appeared in the center of the battlefield, it emitted a terrifying burst of qi. This aura seemed capable of destroying the entire world. As this purple long saber appeared in the center of the battlefield, the qi emanating from this purple long saber suppressed both the experts of the underworld and the experts of the Tianxian Holy Land who were fighting in the battle. It seemed to indiscriminately suppress everyone present. Alas, I never expected that after countless years my Tianxian Holy Land would commit such an act. Following this, an ancient voice was heard, seemingly piercing through space and time, slowly spreading across the entire sky. As this ancient voice spread across the entire sky, the purple long saber in the sky also emitted a terrifying burst of qi. This terrifying qi seemed to be welcoming that ancient voice. At this moment, the great saint-level experts watching the battle outside looked at the purple battle saber in the center of the battlefield with eyes full of disbelief. The dragon-slaying saber. I never thought it was the ultimate emperor weapon, the dragon-slaying saber of the Tianxian Holy Land. It seems that venerable figure of the Tianxian Holy Land has emerged. A great saint-level expert exclaimed, looking at the purple battle saber in the center of the battlefield with astonishment in his eyes. At the same time, there was a hint of dread in his eyes. Clearly, this great saint-level figure had guessed who was about to appear. Chapter 485, The Appearance of the Supreme Emperor Weapon, and the Decision of the Quasi-Emperor Ancestor of the Heavenly Profound Holy Land. And those top experts around him, after hearing his words, instantly turned their gaze towards the purple long saber in the center of the battlefield. Although the purple long saber looked very ancient, drops of terrifying fresh blood could still be seen on it. This fresh blood seemed to be the blood of a great emperor from legends. Moreover, the qi emanating from this purple long saber far exceeded the range that ordinary people could bear. Looking at the long saber in the sky, these top experts' eyes revealed a look of madness and disbelief. I didn't expect Tianxian Holy Land to bring out their ultimate emperor weapon. It seems this great battle should be over. After all, the ultimate emperor weapon has already appeared. Alas, although I also greatly anticipate the underworld defeating Tianxian Holy Land, it is clear that even with so many quasi-emperor level strong experts, the underworld cannot defeat Tianxian Holy Land, which possesses an ultimate emperor weapon. Indeed, unless the underworld also has an ultimate emperor weapon, otherwise they have no chance of victory in this great battle. What a pity! I didn't expect the final outcome of this great battle to end with Tianxian Holy Land's victory. After all, Tianxian Holy Land is a top power in the central region no matter how you look at it. Their ultimate emperor weapon will naturally protect them. Otherwise, Tianxian Holy Land would have probably been destroyed by other forces long ago. At this moment, everyone also began to discuss the ultimate emperor weapon. Of course, more importantly, many strong experts at this time felt that the underworld should retreat this time. After all, Tianxian Holy Land's ultimate emperor weapon had already appeared. So if the underworld wanted to defeat Tianxian Holy Land, it would have to bring out an ultimate emperor weapon. But could the underworld bring out an ultimate emperor weapon now? Obviously, such a situation did not exist. Otherwise, why hadn't they seen the underworld's ultimate emperor weapon? At this moment, the disciples and elders of Tianxian Holy Land in the center of the battlefield showed a hint of frenzied fervor in their eyes. They had not expected their own ultimate emperor weapon to appear at this moment. One must know that an ultimate emperor weapon is the faith of a top power. At the same time, a power possessing an ultimate emperor weapon is also considered the most top power in the central region. Of course, most importantly, if the ultimate emperor weapon fully revives, then the quasi-emperor level strong experts within that power will possess the battle intent of a great emperor realm within a short period of time. one must know that the Great Emperor Realm is the ceiling of this world. So with the battle intent of a Great Emperor Realm, they can naturally disregard the strong experts of this world. At this time, on the side of the Qilin war chariot, Chu Fan looked at the ultimate emperor weapon in the sky with a hint of helplessness in his eyes. However, at this moment, he was indeed guessing whether Chuan Ying could fight against the ultimate emperor weapon in the sky. After all, his strength had reached the alternative path to enlightenment, and with such strength, he could even fight against a strong expert at the ordinary Great Emperor Realm. And Fei Peng, who was in front of him, stared at the ultimate emperor weapon in the sky with a hint of battle intent in his eyes. Although his strength was only at the peak quasi-emperor realm, with the demon suppressing sword in hand, his strength was not as simple as just the peak quasi-emperor realm. He even had the power to fight against a strong expert at the supreme being realm. Amidst everyone's expectant gazes, an old man slowly walked out from the back mountain of Tianxian Holy Land. The old man carried a terrifying qi about him. Perhaps because the old man had just revived, the terrifying qi on him was not restrained. At the same time, his steps appeared very slow. Of course, it only looked slow. In the blink of an eye, he had already appeared in the sky. Then, he slowly turned his gaze towards Chu Fan's side. At this moment, he naturally knew that Chu Fan was the protagonist of this great battle. And he also knew that Chu Fan could command this war. Of course, more importantly, this old man also turned his gaze towards Fei Peng. He felt a terrifying pressure from Fei Peng. Although the old man had also reached the peak quasi-emperor realm, if he didn't rely on the ultimate emperor weapon, he might not be Fei Peng's opponent. I didn't expect there to be such a strong expert as fellow Taoist in the world, but today's matter should end here, right? As for the mastermind behind this incident, this old man will leave him to Your Excellency to deal with. What do you think, Your Excellency? Then, this peak quasi-emperor realm expert of Tianxian Holy Land slowly turned his gaze towards Fei Peng, and after a glance, he looked at Chu Fan again. At the same time, he expressed his meaning. Which people from Tianxian Holy Land do you intend to hand over to me for disposal? After hearing the old man's words, Chu Fan showed no signs of worry. Instead, he calmly stepped forward and questioned the old man. At the same time, his eyes also carried a hint of anger. After all, this old man didn't appear at the beginning, but only when their underworld's great battle had already gained the upper hand. And Chu Fan believed that if it weren't for the truth being exposed, this old fellow would have probably directly attacked their underworld. I wonder if this is enough. The old man frowned after hearing Chu Fan's words. Then, he waved his hand, and Xian Tian and the Xian family members were instantly sent in front of Chu Fan. Of course, the quasi-emperor realm old ancestor of the Xian family was not sent in front of Chu Fan. After all, a strong expert of the quasi-emperor realm was still very useful to their Tianxian Holy Land. When Xian Tian saw this scene, his face instantly lost all its radiance. Then he looked at Chu Fan with a numb expression. At this moment, Chu Fan was somewhat displeased because the attitude of this peak quasi-emperor realm expert old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land made him somewhat unsatisfied. It was as if this old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land was acting superior. Does Your Excellency think that possessing an ultimate emperor weapon can suppress my underworld, or does Your Excellency look down on this lord? Chu Fan, who had a temper, naturally wouldn't swallow his anger. He looked at this peak quasi-emperor realm expert old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land and questioned him. After speaking, he slowly took a step forward to express his dissatisfaction. And this peak quasi-emperor realm expert old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land was also very surprised after hearing Chu Fan's words. He didn't expect Chu Fan to still dare to provoke him now. So, this peak quasi-emperor realm expert old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land slowly turned his gaze towards Fei Peng. This fellow Taoist strength is indeed very strong. If I don't use the ultimate emperor weapon, I might not be his opponent, but if I use the ultimate emperor weapon, he won't be able to protect you. The language of this peak quasi-emperor realm expert old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land was filled with calmness, and at the same time, his face also carried a hint of confidence. He was clearly full of confidence in both the ultimate emperor weapon and his own strength. Chapter 486, The Ultimate Trump Card. Chuan Ying appears, and the Heavenly Alliance's speculation on the quasi-emperor. After the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land, a peak quasi-emperor realm expert, finished speaking, he slowly turned his gaze towards Chu Fan. At this moment, he felt no fear in his heart. Instead, he was somewhat curious about Chu Fan's trump card. The strong experts from other factions were also very surprised to hear the conversation between Chu Fan and the peak quasi-emperor realm expert from Tianxian Holy Land. They hadn't expected Tianxian Holy Land to be so accommodating. Yet Chu Fan still wouldn't yield. This instantly made them curious. They were curious as to what trump cards Chu Fan truly possessed. After all, the trump cards Chu Fan had displayed since his appearance had far exceeded their imagination. Even the TRANSMIGRATION Alliance leader was looking at Chu Fan's direction with great curiosity at this moment. At the same time, several quasi-emperor level strong experts beside the TRANSMIGRATION Alliance leader also looked at Chu Fan with curiosity in their eyes. Indeed, I did not bring the ultimate emperor weapon of the underworld with me this time, but merely relying on the power of your ultimate emperor weapon, I'm afraid it won't be able to threaten me. Chu Fan scoffed after hearing the words of the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land, a peak quasi-emperor realm expert. Then he once again made the same gesture as before. Everyone who saw this scene looked at Chu Fan's back with a mix of shock and longing in their eyes. At the same time, as Chu Fan waved his hand, a terrifying ripple slowly began to appear in the void realm behind him. The next second, a young man holding a battle spear, with no ripple of emotion on his face, appeared before everyone. The young man had no aura about him. He seemed like an ordinary person. However, this young man stood in the sky without the aid of any law. From this, it could be seen that the young man's cultivation was not as simple as they had imagined. The moment the young man appeared, he directed his gaze towards the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land, a peak quasi-emperor realm expert, in front of him. At the same time, the battle spear in his hand also began to tremble. The young man was precisely Chuaning. Having achieved alternative path to enlightenment, his aura naturally could not be perceived by these great sages and cultivators below the great sage realm. However, strong experts of the quasi-emperor realm could easily sense the terrifying aura on Chuaning. Although he hadn't fully released his aura, simply by a single glance, the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land, a peak quasi-emperor realm expert, was filled with disbelief. He could even sense that the young man in front of him might only need one move to defeat him. Thinking of this, he furiously kept muttering, "Impossible. A Supreme Being realm strong expert. How could the underworld possess a Supreme Being realm strong expert? Impossible, this is fake, impossible." Then, the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land, a peak quasi-emperor realm expert, began to retreat, the terror in his eyes unable to dissipate. Of course, at this moment, the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land, a peak quasi-emperor realm expert, had also guessed Chuan Ying's true cultivation. His guess was not entirely accurate, but Chuan Ying's strength was indeed similar to what he had guessed. The people of Tianxian Holy Land looked at Chuan Ying standing in the sky with incredulity after hearing their old ancestors' words. They were naturally not too unfamiliar with the Supreme Being realm, because the Supreme Being realm was a realm formed by a strong expert at the Great Emperor realm severing himself with a single strike. But even if a strong expert at the Great Emperor realm severed himself with a single strike, their strength still far exceeded the Quasi-Emperor realm. It could even be said that their realm was still the Great Emperor realm. It was just that their strength was slightly weaker than the Great Emperor realm. But even so, strong experts at the Supreme Being realm could still achieve ultimate sublimation, at which point they would regain the battle power of the Great Emperor realm. At that time, even with an ultimate Emperor weapon, they would have no chance to resist. Thinking of this, the people of Tianxian Holy Land looked at Chuan Ying in the sky with despair in their eyes. Of course, at this moment, the strong experts from other factions were extremely shocked. I didn't expect the underworld to actually have a Supreme Being realm strong expert. It seems we have underestimated the underworld after all. I just don't know which forbidden zone this Supreme Being realm strong expert of the underworld comes from. At this moment, the TRANSMIGRATION Alliance leader also had an incredulous look in his eyes, and then he began to ponder incessantly in his heart. A Supreme Being realm strong expert. Even their Heavenly Dao Alliance could not contend with one. Of course, their Heavenly Dao Alliance also possessed several strong experts at the peak Quasi-Emperor realm. But strong experts at the peak Quasi-Emperor realm seemed somewhat insufficient in front of a Supreme Being realm strong expert. What's more, a Supreme Being realm strong expert could also achieve ultimate sublimation. His aura doesn't seem like the Supreme Being realm. Instead, it's closer to the Great Emperor realm. An old ancestor at the Quasi-Emperor realm beside the TRANSMIGRATION Alliance leader said with a frown at this moment. Perhaps others thought Chuan Ying was a strong expert at the Supreme Being realm, but at this moment, he could indeed feel that Chuan Ying's true realm was not the Supreme Being realm, because the Supreme Being realm was filled with death chi and murderous aura, while Chuan Ying had no death chi or murderous intent. Instead, he possessed an indomitable aura. From this point, it could be seen that Chuan Ying should not be in the Supreme Being realm. Could he have stepped onto the legendary alternative path to enlightenment? At this moment, another Quasi-Emperor beside the TRANSMIGRATION Alliance leader naturally also saw this point, so he looked at Chuan Ying with incredulity and spoke. Alternative path to enlightenment was very ancient to them. It could even be said that achieving alternative path to enlightenment was as difficult as achieving the Great Emperor realm. Because from ancient times until now, the number of alternative Dao attainers has not been many. In fact, their number was even less than the number of strong experts of the Great Emperor realm. Therefore, the old ancestor of Tianxian Holy Land, a peak quasi-emperor realm expert, had initially assumed Chuan Ying's realm was the supreme being realm. If this person is truly an alternative Dao attainer, then the power of the underworld is probably not as simple as we imagine. And besides him, another person in the underworld has also reached the peak quasi-emperor realm. According to his aura, breaking through to alternative path to enlightenment should be easier for him than for us. The quasi-emperor of the Heavenly Dao Alliance, who had just spoken, now slowly spoke again. And as he said this, a hint of disbelief and emotion appeared in his eyes. If Chuan Ying was truly an alternative Dao attainer, then perhaps the underworld had a method for alternative path to enlightenment. In that case, another peak quasi-emperor realm expert in the underworld might also walk this path in the future. And thinking of this, a hint of fervor also appeared in the eyes of this quasi-emperor of the Heavenly Dao Alliance. But this fervor was quickly suppressed by him. After all, if the underworld truly had a method for alternative path to enlightenment, then this method was not something a mere quasi-emperor like him could explore. After all, they already possessed the method for alternative path to enlightenment. Then how could there be few alternative Dao attainers in the underworld? Perhaps the underworld was even more terrifying than a forbidden zone. Chapter 487, The Compromise of the Heavenly Profound Holy Land, the Imperial War that did not erupt. It wasn't just these quasi-emperors of the Heavenly Dao Alliance who had this speculation. The strong experts from other forces also had their own guesses at this moment. Of course, while they suspected that the underworld possessed an alternative path attainment expert, they were also wary of the underworld's strength at this time. However, at this moment, they did not intend to surrender to the underworld. After all, every one of their forces had seen the emergence of great emperor-level expert. Therefore, they all possessed their own trump cards. This was also why Chu Fan did not destroy Tianxian Holy Land immediately upon arriving. Perhaps the underworld could mobilize all its forces to destroy Tianxian Holy Land now. But what awaited the underworld would be a coalition of many forces. At that time, the underworld would have to face numerous forces from the central domain. Moreover, more importantly, after destroying Tianxian Holy Land, the underworld's strength would certainly be affected. Therefore, Chu Fan did not plan to destroy the underworld immediately. And more importantly, the Great Xia dynasty would enter the central domain before long. So he naturally could not choose to fight Tianxian Holy Land to the bitter end at this critical moment. Of course, if Tianxian Holy Land chose to resist them to the death, then Chu Fan would naturally not mind destroying the entire Tianxian Holy Land. At this moment, with the appearance of the underworld's alternative path attainment expert, the eyes of the peak quasi-emperor realm expert from Tianxian Holy Land were also filled with disbelief. Of course, at this moment, he no longer had the arrogance he displayed at the beginning. More than that, he looked at Chuan Ying with disbelief in his eyes, while at the same time, his mind was pondering how to deal with the underworld. After all, this incident was originally Tianxian Holy Land's fault, so even if the underworld destroyed them, the central domain would not say anything. Thinking of this, the peak quasi-emperor realm expert from Tianxian Holy Land slowly turned his gaze towards Chu Fan. Although Chu Fan was merely a great saint realm cultivator, he didn't even have the desire to act against him. However, Chu Fan could now control the life of a holy land. It could even be said that the only one who could make the underworld stop now was Chu Fan. The peak quasi-emperor realm expert from the underworld could only sigh helplessly at this thought. Then, he slowly turned his gaze towards Chu Fan. I wonder how this young master intends to resolve today's great battle. As long as the young master's demands are not too excessive, our Tianxian Holy Land will agree to the young master's terms. Subsequently, this peak quasi-emperor realm expert spoke to Chu Fan with some helplessness. After speaking, his gaze swept over the numerous Xian family disciples within Tianxian Holy Land. At this moment, he already knew that the Xian family disciples probably had no chance of survival. Although he had already eliminated many members of the Xian family when he made his move, those were all Xian family members who had no room for growth. Those who remained now all had room for growth. Some great saint-level expert even had the potential to become quasi-emperor realm in the future, but according to the current situation, these great saint-level expert would probably not survive. When this lord came, I said that as long as Tianxian Holy Land restores my brother's innocence and hands over the Xian family lineage for me to deal with, then our underworld will not fight a great battle with Tianxian Holy Land. Otherwise, let's start an emperor battle. Chu Fan looked at the peak quasi-emperor realm expert from Tianxian Holy Land in front of him with a playful expression. Then he slowly looked at the disciples of Tianqian Holy Land and said, his main purpose in coming this time was to seek justice for his brother, as long as Tianqian Holy Land gave them this justice. Then Chu Fan would naturally not choose to attack Tianqian Holy Land again. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the old ancestor of Tianqian Holy Land also looked at the disciples of Tianqian Holy Land with a thoughtful gaze. For them, giving justice to Chu Fan's brother was not a big problem. After all, they could push all the blame onto Xintian. However, if they handed over the entire Xian family lineage to Chu Fan for disposal, it would mean that their Tianqian Holy Land would lose more than a dozen great saint-level expert and one quasi-emperor realm expert. It should be known that a quasi-emperor realm expert is considered the top combat power in any powerful force. Moreover, there were also several potential quasi-emperor realm expert within the Xian family lineage. Of course, more importantly, if their Tianqian Holy Land compromised today, then Tianqian Holy Land would become the laughingstock of the entire central domain. Even the disciples from those top forces would leave their Tianqian Holy Land. At that time, the reputation of Tianqian Holy Land would plummet. However, it seemed there was no other way to resolve this matter now. So, he raised his head and slowly looked at Chu Fan. The old ancestor of the Xian family, next to him, also had a tragic look in his eyes at this moment. Because at this time, the quasi-emperor level old ancestor of the Xian family had already guessed this outcome. At the same time, the remaining quasi-emperor level old ancestors of Tianqian Holy Land also looked at the Xian family old ancestor of Tianqian Holy Land with a hint of helplessness in their eyes. They had not expected that a quasi-emperor realm expert would lose his life because of a true king realm cultivator. As for the disciples of Tianqian Holy Land, they looked up at their old ancestor at this moment, wanting to see how their old ancestor planned to respond to Chu Fan. At this moment, their old ancestor also nodded towards Chu Fan with some helplessness. Tianqian Holy Land agrees to all of the Underworld's demands. We only hope that the Underworld can quickly withdraw its assassins. The old ancestor at the peak quasi-emperor realm of Tianqian Holy Land was also forced into this. As if he did not choose this, then an emperor battle would commence between the two major forces. At that time, their Tianqian Holy Land would probably be completely shattered. If the Underworld only had a peak quasi-emperor realm existence, then their Tianqian Holy Land might still be able to fight the Underworld. But now, the Underworld possessed an alternative path to enlightenment. With such a terrifying existence, their Tianqian Holy Land naturally would not choose to go to war with the Underworld. As the words of the old ancestor at the peak quasi-emperor realm of Tianqian Holy Land fell, the other strong experts of Tianqian Holy Land also breathed a sigh of relief at this moment. At the same time, the faces of the disciples of Tianqian Holy Land also showed a glimmer of hope. At first, they were afraid that the Underworld would completely annihilate them, but they did not expect that the old ancestor of Tianqian Holy Land had actually agreed to this request. However, since their old ancestor had agreed to this request, it meant that they would be safe and sound. Chu Fan also nodded after receiving the agreement of the old ancestor of Tianqian Holy Land. Then he looked at Fei Peng beside him. Fei Peng instantly understood his meaning and directly waved his hand, capturing all of the Xian family lineage. After completing all of this, he returned to Chu Fan's side. Chapter 488. The news spread throughout the central region, causing turmoil in the region. Chu Fan saw that the matter was mostly settled. Thus, he slowly cast his gaze toward the surrounding cultivators who were watching the battle. Only then did he slowly look toward the Holy Lord of the Tianqian Holy Land. This seat hopes that after today, this seat will hear about the Xian family faction of the Tianqian Holy Land framing my elder brother. Furthermore, if the Tianqian Holy Land has any information regarding my elder brother, please notify my Difu. Following this, Chu Fan's voice slowly echoed through the sky, and as his voice faded, Chu Fan immediately returned to the Qilin war chariot. Inside the Qilin war chariot, Chu Fan nodded toward the experts in front. As for Xiao Zi beside Chu Fan, she slowly looked toward the direction of the Tianqian Holy Land, but quickly retracted her gaze. Since she had already returned to the side of the person she longed for, she naturally would no longer cling to the Tianqian Holy Land. Following this, the assassins of Di Fu led the way, and the Qilin war chariot once again pierced the sky, transforming into a golden beam of light. It completely vanished into the sky. Only the onlookers were left behind. At the same time, what remained was the Tianqian Holy Land, permeated with the smell of blood after a great battle. Although the old ancestor of the Tianqian Holy Land appeared very quickly this time, even so, the number of great saint-level experts who fell in the Tianqian Holy Land reached more than 10, and hundreds of cultivators from the Tianqian Holy Land at the entering saint realm also perished. First, spread the news about the Xian family framing Chu Chun. The old ancestor of the Tianxian Holy Land at the peak Quasi-Emperor realm sighed softly, while looking in the direction the Qilin war chariot had left, and then he slowly spoke to the Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land. After speaking, he took the ultimate emperor weapon of the Tianxian Holy Land and returned to the back mountain of the Tianxian Holy Land. The Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land respectfully cupped his hands toward the old ancestor of the Tianxian Holy Land after hearing his words. He then looked with a hint of emotion toward the place where the Qilin war chariot had vanished. The Holy Lord of the Tianxian Holy Land had not expected Chu Fan to have such a terrifying force backing him. If he had known at the time, he definitely would have tried his best to stop the Xian family, and might have even directly punished the Xian family then and there. However, it was already too late for all of this. At the same time, the quasi-saint's sons and true disciples of the Tianxian Holy Land also looked on with emotion. They had not expected the power behind their saint to be so mighty. They also had not expected that their saint had been framed this time, and the main reason was that their saint possessed a supreme bone. This instantly made them feel that the Tianxian Holy Land was not worth staying in. The true disciples of the Tianxian Holy Land who originally came from top forces were also contemplating whether they should return to their own forces. As a holy land, the Tianxian Holy Land naturally absorbed disciples from various forces, although these disciples were not necessarily truly top-tier disciples. However, there were also descendants from top forces who, unable to assume the position of family head, could naturally go to other forces. Of course, this could only happen within those holy lands. After all, aside from holy lands, other places were very concerned about bloodline. Especially within those families, bloodline was their most important legacy. After Chu Fan left with the experts of Difu, this punitive expedition was completely over. However, after this day, the entire central region became turbulent, because no one had expected the strength of Difu to reach such a terrifying level. Furthermore, what was even more unexpected was that the force behind the former saint of the Tianxian Holy Land was actually Difu. Of course, what made everyone in the central region feel even more unbelievable was that the saint of the Tianxian Holy Land had been framed by internal experts colluding, which led him to destroy his supreme bone and escape. At the same time, they understood how difficult Chu Chen's situation must have been back then. I didn't expect Chu Chen to have been framed. What a pity, a perfectly good saint was ruined like that. But what is even more shocking is that Chu Chen has such a powerful force backing him. If the force behind him had been revealed earlier, perhaps the Tianxian Holy Land wouldn't have dared to act against him. If he had revealed it earlier, the Tianxian Holy Land probably would have revered him entirely. It's just that the Tianxian Holy Land never expected Chu Chen to have a force as terrifying as Difu backing him. I wonder where Chu Chen is now, and if the injuries on his body have recovered. Even if he recovers, he won't be considered a top prodigy. After all, the supreme bone that allowed him to grow has already been destroyed. Following the release of the Tianxian Holy Land's explanation, the entire central region became very turbulent. Those forces that received this news in advance were fine. However, the loose cultivators and cultivators from smaller forces who were unaware of this news stared in disbelief toward the Tianxian Holy Land. They had not expected the final outcome to be like this. At the same time, they never expected Chu Chen to have been wronged. Of course, what shocked them even more was the power of Difu. To be able to pressure the Tianxian Holy Land like that, and force the entire Tianxian Holy Land into complete submission. As the news slowly spread, the cultivators in the central region continuously discussed the outcome of this matter. Naturally, the major forces were now discussing how to deal with Difu, as the strength of Difu had reached an unimaginable level. Even the Heavenly Dao Alliance at this moment was somewhat helpless in discussing countermeasures against Difu. Although the Heavenly Dao Alliance was very powerful, the strongest among them was only at the peak Quasi-Emperor realm. Yet, Difu possessed an existence that achieved the alternative path to enlightenment. Of course, the appearance of an alternative path attainment expert from Difu this time did not just capture the attention of the top forces present. Even the Xianyuan family, which usually stayed out of worldly affairs, had their attention drawn because of this. Inside the main hall of the Xianyuan family, the family head and the elders of the Xianyuan family were currently looking at the incoming news, their eyes filled with disbelief. We didn't expect an alternative path attainment expert to appear in the outside world as well, and it seems this alternative path attainment expert still has a long lifespan. After a long while, an elder of the Xianyuan family slowly spoke, though a hint of disbelief could still be seen in the elder's eyes. Evidently, even this elder of the Xianyuan family found the news hard to believe. After all, an alternative Dao attainer was considered the rarest existence even within their Xianyuan family. It was difficult for one to appear even across several eras. One must realize that an expert at the great emperor level could appear within a span of 20 to 30,000 years. However, it takes at least 50,000 years for an alternative path attainment expert to appear. Chapter 489, The Mystery of the Xianyuan Family. The Supreme Being's Resentment towards the Xianyuan Emperor. The patriarch of the Xianyuan family and the other elders also nodded their heads, finding it somewhat hard to believe after hearing what that elder said. After all, they had not expected an existence capable of alternative path to enlightenment to appear in the outside world. One must understand that an existence that has achieved alternative path to enlightenment signifies the appearance of a Supreme Being level expert in the world. Supreme Being level experts are very difficult to encounter normally. It could even be said that these supreme experts might not appear for tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years. From this, one can clearly see just how terrifying an alternative path to enlightenment expert is. This truly is a troubled time. An alternative Tao attainer actually appeared in the era just as the possessor of the human emperor fate emerged. We just don't know if this alternative Tao attainer will prevent the possessor of the human emperor fate from achieving the Tao. Following this, the patriarch of the Xianyuan family spoke with a hint of helplessness on his face. Naturally, they were extremely happy about the possessor of the human emperor fate. After all, for millions of years, their Xianyuan family had not seen a possessor of the human emperor fate appear, and during these millions of years, the entire continent had not produced a possessor of the human emperor fate either. Now, a possessor of the human emperor fate has appeared. Their Xianyuan family naturally would not miss this opportunity. Of course, the Xianyuan family would not invest in this possessor of the human emperor fate before they had fully matured. Because, in the view of the Xianyuan family, the possessor of the human emperor fate can only be considered a true human emperor if they grow strong on their own. This is also the reason why the Xianyuan family did not support the possessor of the human emperor fate, even after learning the news of the possessor of the human emperor fate's appearance. The possessor of the human emperor fate is extremely important to our Xianyuan family. It is the only clue that can lead our Xianyuan family to explore the path of our former old ancestor. So even if this alternative Tao attainer tries to stop the possessor of the human emperor fate, we must take action. At this moment, an old man slowly walked out and spoke, looking at the patriarch of the Xianyuan family, while his face held a determined expression. He was extremely firm about this matter. That is right. Although the strength of the alternative Tao attainer is very powerful, our Xianyuan family is not without alternative Tao attainers. If necessary, we will awaken the family's alternative Tao attainer to protect the possessor of the human emperor fate. Furthermore, if this alternative Tao attainer knows that the possessor of the human emperor fate has appeared in this era, perhaps he will not choose to stop the possessor of the human emperor fate. After all, when the possessor of the human emperor fate achieves the Tao, he might be able to use this opportunity for the ultimate leap. Regardless, our Xianyuan family should now search for the whereabouts of the possessor of the human emperor fate. The elders of the Xianyuan family all spoke up in agreement after hearing the words of that elder. At the same time, it could be learned from the words of these elders that there were also existences who achieved alternative path to enlightenment within the Xianyuan family, and perhaps there were quite a few of these alternative path to enlightenment existences in their Xianyuan family. At the same time, some elders suggested that it was now time to search for this possessor of the human emperor fate. We do not need to search for the possessor of the human emperor fate, because the human emperor fate of the possessor of the human emperor fate is currently extremely dazzling. Clearly, it is maturing quickly, so perhaps it will not be long before we see it in the central region. At this moment, the old man of the Xianyuan family who had remained silent slowly spoke. After finishing, his gaze drifted outside the Xianyuan family. Looking closely, one could see that the qi emanating from this old ancestor of the Xianyuan family had already reached the quasi-emperor realm. If the cultivation of just one old man had already reached the quasi-emperor realm, then what realm had the true old ancestors of the Xianyuan family reached? The other members of the Xianyuan family also nodded after hearing the words of this old ancestor. Even the patriarch of the Xianyuan family could only nod at this moment. Subsequently, the Xianyuan family began discussing how to handle the possessor of the human emperor fate who would arrive next. After all, the possessor of the human emperor fate was the most precious thing to their Xianyuan family, and could even be said to be the glimmer of hope they had pursued for millions of years. At the same time, in the West Sea restricted area, this was one of the 4 major restricted areas of the central region, and also the place where the true supremes resided. At this moment, an old man emanating terrifying death qi slowly opened his eyes. Then he silently cast his gaze toward the direction of the underworld. This was because the old man sensed a wave of qi coming from that location that could threaten him. I did not expect that besides the Xianyuan family, there are actually other forces that possess existences who achieved alternative path to enlightenment. It seems that Tao will finally appear in this epic. Then this old man, emanating terrifying qi, spoke slowly while looking ahead. However, as he reached this point, a hint of excitement appeared in his eyes. It was as if something that could allow him to improve had finally appeared. Although Xianyuan cut off that path is about to reappear. After all, Xianyuan would never have expected the spiritual qi in the world we inhabit to recover so quickly. Another aged voice slowly reached this place, and a trace of anger could be heard in that voice. Obviously, the owner of this voice was extremely angry at the former Xianyuan human emperor. Do not underestimate the Xianyuan human emperor. After all, it is possible he left behind a contingency on that path. As the most outstanding prodigy in tens of millions of years, and the only expert who ascended to heavenly emperor through the human emperor righteous path, how could he not have anticipated this? Just after this angry voice fell silent, another voice slowly rang out in the distance, and a sense of dread could be heard in that voice. Obviously, he was extremely wary of the former Xianyuan human emperor. After all, the former Xianyuan human emperor had driven all of them back from that path, which is why these supremes had to continuously self-mutilate their cultivation. After all, as a great emperor-level expert, who will want to self-mutilate their cultivation to become a cultivator of the supreme being realm. However, at this moment, they could only helplessly continue to cling to life. At the same time, the main goal of their clinging to life was to wait for that path to appear and then successfully step onto it. Throughout history, the only one who successfully stepped onto that path was the former Xianyuan human emperor. But after the Xianyuan human emperor stepped onto that path, he never returned. Moreover, after the Xianyuan human emperor stepped onto that path, he destroyed the end of the entire path. This is also why the great emperor-level experts who came after the Xianyuan human emperor were unable to step onto that path. Of course, some great emperor-level experts also mysteriously disappeared, and many supremes speculated that these missing great emperor-level experts had found that path. This is also why so many forces once attacked the Xianyuan family. Chapter 490, The Excitement of Cultivators in the Central Region. The Fall of the Western and Southern Regions. After all, in the span of several million years, only Xianyuan human emperor truly entered that path. Therefore, many people speculated that Xianyuan human emperor truly became the legendary immortal. This is also why the once glorious Xianyuan family can now only live in seclusion. After all, those coveting their Xianyuan family were not just these hidden supreme beings. There were also those strong experts from the Yao race or the human race. They all hoped to obtain longevity. And if they wanted to obtain longevity, contacting the Xianyuan family was the simplest method. However, by this time, the Xianyuan family had already gone into hiding. Furthermore, the Xianyuan family's strength was still so formidable. Therefore, these people naturally had no way to obtain the method for longevity from the Xianyuan family. Of course, even the Xianyuan family itself did not know about true longevity. Perhaps it could be said that the Xianyuan family itself did not possess the method for longevity. All their Xianyuan family possessed was a method that allowed peak experts to live for an extra 10,000 years. Time passed bit by bit, and in the blink of an eye, half a month had gone by. During this half a month, the matters concerning the underworld and the Tianxian Holy Land had spread throughout the entire central region. At the same time, during this half a month, the underworld had completely become a true peak power in the central region. Although the underworld strength had already reached the level of a peak power from the start. However, the underworld had never produced a great emperor-level expert, and in previous battles, quasi-emperor-level expert from the underworld had not appeared. Therefore, although the underworld strength had reached a level recognized by them, many people did not truly categorize the underworld as being at the level of a peak power. It was only after this great battle between the underworld and the Tianxian Holy Land that all the central region powers realized just how formidable the underworld's strength truly was. Simultaneously, the underworld was listed by many powers as an entity not to be provoked. Of course, most importantly, many powers have been continuously circulating portraits of Chu Fan during this period, cautioning their subordinates not to provoke Chu Fan. After all, this individual was someone who could wipe out a peak power at the drop of a hat. Meanwhile, during this time, many people were searching for information regarding Chu Chun, because immediately after Chu Fan returned to the underworld, he issued a search order across the entire central region. Whoever had news of Chu Chun would be rewarded with a great saint weapon by the underworld. Alternatively, if someone could bring Chu Chun to the underworld would give them a cultivation technique that allowed them to cultivate up to the quasi-emperor realm. They would even offer an emperor scripture if necessary. This instantly caused the entire central region to go into an uproar. Even those first-rate powers began continuously searching for news of Chu Chun. After all, this was a walking opportunity. One must know that the strongest existences among first-rate powers were merely great saint-level experts. Of course, between first-rate powers and peak powers, there was also a type of semi-peak power. Although this power possessed quasi-emperor-level experts, they lacked the foundation of a great emperor-level power. For example, the Wang family in the central region at this time belonged to the realm between first-rate powers and peak powers. Although their family possessed quasi-emperor-level experts, their family truly lacked the foundation left behind by a great emperor-level expert. Therefore, compared to a true peak power, they were still slightly lacking. However, if they could possess an expert at the perfected quasi-emperor realm, then this power would also be able to become a peak power alongside those that possess the foundation of a great emperor-level power. It's just that among peak powers, those powers possessing experts at the perfected quasi-emperor realm are considered slightly weaker peak powers. Meanwhile, powers that possess experts at the supreme being realm are referred to as taboo. For example, the 4 great forbidden zones are the 4 great forbidden lands. Every forbidden zone contains supreme being level experts. Moreover, the number of supreme being level experts inside each forbidden zone is considerable. Furthermore, the ancient desolation forbidden zone possesses over 10, or even dozens, of supreme being level experts. At the same time, that place is the most terrifying forbidden zone in the entire central region. That place was already a forbidden zone before Xianyuan Human Emperor became a great emperor-level expert. While the cultivators of the central region were searching for news of Chu Chun, the great battle in the western region and southern region also completely concluded. The current Great Xia dynasty has completely enveloped the entire world outside of the central region. Because Chu Fan took control of the western region and southern region, his cultivation successfully used a cultivation breakthrough card to break through to the Great Sage Perfection realm. If people knew that he had only taken 1 month to break through to the Great Sage Perfection realm, they would likely be unable to believe the speed of his cultivation breakthrough. After all, he only took 1 month to break through to the Great Sage Perfection realm. Such cultivation speed made everyone else feel disbelief. However, Chu Fan did not show much happiness at this moment, as he had been searching for news of his older brother during this time. Yet, even though he sent out everyone from the underworld, he still couldn't find any news of his older brother, which instantly made Chu Fan feel both angry and surprised. After all, most areas of the central region had already been thoroughly searched by the underworld's people. But even so, Chu Fan still hadn't found any news of his older brother. Although he hadn't found news of his older brother during this month, the growth of the Great Xia dynasty during this month had reached an unprecedented level. It could even be said that the current Great Xia dynasty could now be compared to a true peak power. At the same time, the generals of the Great Xia dynasty had completely leveled up due to the Great Xia dynasty's luck. For instance, the cultivation of Zhao, Zilong, and Lu Bu was already close to reaching the quasi-emperor realm. After all, the Great Xia dynasty had increased its luck by more than twofold this time. Meanwhile, in the eastern region's Great Xia dynasty, Heavenly Secret Master was observing the Great Xia dynasty's luck within the Great Xia dynasty, his eyes filled with disbelief. I never expected this generation's human emperor to grow so quickly. He only spent a few years to grow to this extent, and he even wasted 1 or 2 years in the middle. Perhaps it won't take him long to reach the level of Xianyuan Human Emperor. At this moment, Heavenly Secret Master slowly raised his head, looking at the golden gigantic dragon above the Great Xia dynasty's imperial palace, his eyes filled with expectation. He hadn't expected Chu Fan's growth speed to be so rapid. One must know that in his projections, it would take Chu Fan at least a few hundred years to grow into a great emperor-level expert. But he never expected that Chu Fan would directly incorporate the 4 regions into his domain now. In that case, Chu Fan's growth speed would definitely far exceed his imagination. Chapter 491: The Growth of the Golden Dragon of Fortune, Tianjizi's Worries. However, when Heavenly Secret Master looked at the constantly roaring Golden Dragon of Destiny, a look of helplessness appeared on his face. The Golden Dragon of Destiny had now fully matured. For it to completely help the Great Xia dynasty grow, the Great Xia dynasty must be elevated to the Great Xia Empire. Only then could this Golden Dragon of Destiny be truly utilized. But this time, Chu Fan was not in the Great Xia dynasty, so no one else in the Great Xia dynasty could elevate it to the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, Heavenly Secret Master was feeling helpless about this matter. If Chu Fan could return quickly and elevate the Great Xia dynasty's national destiny, then the speed of cultivation for the cultivators in the Great Xia dynasty would far exceed their imagination. It could even be said that the gap between the eastern region and the central region would gradually shrink. It was even possible that the eastern region would become the next central region. But helplessly, Heavenly Secret Master also knew that Chu Fan could not return now. After all, Chu Fan was still in the central region dealing with matters concerning Chu Chun. Of course, during these days, Heavenly Secret Master had also learned news about the central region. Perhaps it was difficult for others to obtain news about the central region, but it was naturally simple for him, Heavenly Secret Master, to obtain news about the central region. The moment he learned the news from the central region, Heavenly Secret Master's entire face was filled with an expression of disbelief, because he had not expected that there was an alternative Dao attainer by Chu Fan's side. If he had known that there was an alternative Dao attainer by Chu Fan's side, then Heavenly Secret Master might not have been so arrogant when he first arrived in the Great Xia Dynasty. Perhaps he would have directly surrendered to the Great Xia Dynasty at that time. However, knowing that there was an alternative Dao attainer in the Great Xia Dynasty at this time made Heavenly Secret Master even more excited. At the same time, he was also very confident that this generation's possessor of the Human Emperor fate could become a Human Emperor powerhouse more quickly. Human Emperor was not a realm, but among those in the Great Emperor realm, those who could become human emperors were all top-tier powerhouses. In these millions of years, only Xianyuan Human Emperor had become a Human Emperor-level powerhouse. The luck on the Golden Dragon of Destiny is constantly melting. The best outcome now is for the Emperor to return and elevate the Great Xia Dynasty to the Great Xia Empire. Otherwise, the luck lost from the Golden Dragon of Destiny might far exceed my expectations. Then, Heavenly Secret Master looked at the Golden Dragon of Destiny in the sky with a solemn expression. If Chu Fan were in the Great Xia Dynasty, Heavenly Secret Master's face would not have so much solemnity. It was important to know that this luck would have a great effect on Chu Fan in the future. He needed this luck to condense his Human Emperor golden body, so this luck naturally could not be allowed to continue to be lost. Thinking of this, Heavenly Secret Master could only helplessly head to the Prince of Zhenbai's estate. Heavenly Secret Master naturally knew that Chu Tianxiong had already learned about Chu Chun, so this time, Heavenly Secret Master intended to seek out Chu Tianxiong, and then inform Chu Tianxiong of everything that was happening. At this time, the Prince of Zhenbai's estate was as lively as usual. After Chu Fan left the Great Xia Dynasty, his two consorts and children all came to the Prince of Zhenbai's estate. Moreover, Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran also very much liked to stay by Chu Tianxiong's side, as Chu Tianxiong gave them an unprecedented feeling. Chu Tianxiong gave all the affection he had for his own son to these two little ones. Therefore, he naturally doted on these two little ones very much. What's more, now knowing the news that his eldest son might have already perished, Chu Tianxiong could only put all his thoughts on the two little ones. And at this time, Feng Shiran might also have had a guess in her heart. So during this period, she had been accompanying the two little ones with an uneasy mind. As for Chu Long and Jia Qiming, they were very calm, playing chess in the courtyard every day. For them, it was enough to just watch their descendants grow up. Just as peace reigned in the Prince of Zhenbai's estate, Heavenly Secret Master also appeared directly in the Prince of Zhenbai's estate at this moment. Upon appearing in the Prince of Zhenbai's estate, he first cupped his hands to Chu Long. Although Chu Long's strength was indeed not great, he was still Chu Fan's grandfather, no matter what. So Heavenly Secret Master still had some respect for him. And Heavenly Secret Master's arrival also completely attracted everyone's attention. Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran at this time also quickly looked towards Heavenly Secret Master. Heavenly Secret Master also quickly came to the two little ones. Then, he looked at the two little ones with a benevolent smile on his face. May I ask, Senior Heavenly Secret Master, what brings you here? Chu Tianxiong at this time looked at Heavenly Secret Master with some confusion, then asked. After speaking, he slowly turned his gaze to the two little ones in front of him. Heavenly Secret Master's visit here was probably for these two little ones. After all, Heavenly Secret Master had been laying a good foundation for these two little ones during this period, making their future cultivation more promising. Therefore, Chu Tianxiong immediately thought that Heavenly Secret Master had come to find these two little ones. Of course, this idea was not only Chu Tianxiong's. The thoughts of the others around him were also similar to Chu Tianxiong's. I am mainly here to find the Prince of Zhenbai to deal with some matters. After hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, Heavenly Secret Master slowly looked up at the sky, and Chu Tianxiong could also see a hint of worry in his eyes. Clearly, what Heavenly Secret Master wanted to say at this moment had already surprised Chu Tianxiong. And Chu Tianxiong, after hearing Heavenly Secret Master's words, frowned and glanced at Heavenly Secret Master. Then, he waved his hand at Heavenly Secret Master, and the two then left under the gaze of everyone. And everyone who saw this scene had a hint of surprise in their eyes. Of course, even Chu Long, who was playing chess, stopped his movements. Clearly, Chu Long was also a little curious at this time, why Heavenly Secret Master had come to find Chu Tianxiong. Even Feng Shiran, who was standing nearby with a hint of melancholy, also looked at the backs of the two as they left. The two quickly left this place. After a short while, the two directly entered the imperial palace. Chu Tianxiong, who had entered the imperial palace, also looked at Heavenly Secret Master with a hint of doubt on his face. The Great Xia Dynasty's national destiny has already risen to a level that the Great Xia Dynasty can hardly bear. Therefore, the Great Xia Dynasty should now be promoted to the Great Xia Empire. However, the Emperor is not present and cannot advance. So, I would like to ask the Prince of Jinbei to summon the Emperor back. Heavenly Secret Master also directly stated his purpose at this time. After speaking, his face still carried a hint of helplessness. Clearly, Heavenly Secret Master had not thought of summoning Chu Fan back at this time, because Chu Fan was probably dealing with matters concerning Chu Qian at this moment. Chapter 492 Chu Qian's protector recovers most of his cultivation. The search for the Qing Feng Sword Immortal. After Heavenly Secret Master finished speaking, he looked at Chu Tianxiong, clearly waiting for Chu Tianxiong's reply. Chu Tianxiong was stunned after hearing Heavenly Secret Master's words. Although Chu Tianxiong's strength had improved a lot, he naturally couldn't see the national destiny of the Great Xia Dynasty at this time, so he naturally didn't know these things. But now, hearing that Chu Fan was to be summoned back, Chu Tianxiong's face was filled with many doubts. More importantly, he also wanted to know if his eldest young master was all right. Although Chu Fan had been in the central domain all this time, he hadn't told Chu Tianxiong about the matters of the central domain during this period. So he naturally didn't know his eldest young master's current situation. What is his situation like now? Then, Chu Tianxiong frowned and asked Heavenly Secret Master. As the current successor of Tianji Pavilion, Heavenly Secret Master should know the situation in the central domain. That's why Chu Tianxiong directly asked Heavenly Secret Master. After all, Heavenly Secret Master, no matter what, knew some information. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to Chu Tianxiong to say such things. The matters concerning the central domain have been mostly resolved. We just need to find the eldest young master, and all of the eldest young master's enemies have been dealt with. So the Emperor should return now. Heavenly Secret Master replied straightforwardly after hearing Chu Tianxiong's words. He naturally understood the situation in the central domain at this time. It could even be said that Chu Fan had no further role in the central domain now. This was one of the reasons why Heavenly Secret Master wanted Chu Fan to return. Chu Tianxiong fell silent after hearing Heavenly Secret Master's words, although he hadn't received all the information at this time. But based on Heavenly Secret Master's words, he understood the current situation. Although his eldest young master's whereabouts hadn't been found, it was already very good that his younger son hadn't met with an accident in the central domain. After all, if Chu Fan had met with an accident in the central domain, then the entire Chu family would probably collapse completely. Although Chu Fan had left Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran for the Chu family, Chu Fan was, after all, the most beloved by Chu Long and others. So he naturally couldn't accept Chu Fan meeting with an accident in the central domain. If that's the case, then I will write him a letter. Chu Tianxiong understood after hearing Heavenly Secret Master's words, and then he slowly spoke to Heavenly Secret Master. After speaking, his gaze drifted towards the distant horizon. Heavenly Secret Master nodded after hearing Chu Tianxiong's words. In fact, the main reason he sought out Chu Tianxiong was that he was afraid Chu Fan wouldn't listen to them. As Chu Fan's father, Chu Fan should listen to Chu Tianxiong, which is why Heavenly Secret Master chose to approach Chu Tianxiong. Chu Tianxiong then began to write a letter to Chu Fan in the central domain. Then he directly handed it to a killer from the net of Luo. After receiving the message, the killer from the net of Luo quickly rushed towards the central domain. Just as the golden dragon of destiny on the Great Xia Dynasty's side surged at this moment in the central domain, in a mysterious valley. At this moment, a middle-aged man looked at the aura emanating from his body and nodded in satisfaction. It could be seen that the aura emanating from this middle-aged man had already reached the perfected saint realm. After such a long time, my cultivation has finally mostly recovered, but might be difficult to recover to the Saint King realm. However, the expression on the middle-aged man's face quickly became somewhat complex. He hadn't expected it would take him such a long time to restore his cultivation to the perfected saint realm. But thinking that his cultivation was lost due to the law of time, the middle-aged man nodded helplessly. The middle-aged man was Chu Chen's guardian. During this time, he had been recovering his cultivation in the valley. After all, if his cultivation didn't recover, it would be extremely difficult for him to protect his young master. Since my cultivation has recovered to this extent, then the next step should be to find a way out. After all, it's not good for the young master to stay here forever. For the young master to recover, at least a great saint-level expert is needed. Then, the middle-aged man looked at the crystal coffin in front of him with a hint of helplessness in his eyes. At this moment, he had already begun to ponder how to resolve his young master's situation. After all, he had no way to help Chu Chun recover now, unless he sought out those great saint-level experts. Therefore, the middle-aged man's idea at this time was to find his master, who was Chu Fan's master. Then, the middle-aged man placed the crystal coffin containing Chu Chun into his storage ring, and then his entire being transformed into a ray of light and disappeared into the valley. It was as if nothing had happened in this valley, and no one knew that the saint of Tianxian Holy Land and a Saint King level expert of Tianxian Holy Land had resided in this seemingly inconspicuous valley. Of course, outside cultivators also didn't know that Chu Chun was here. Otherwise, with the bounty from the underworld, they would have probably appeared here countless times already. As the middle-aged man left this valley with Chu Chun's body, at this moment, a great saint-level expert in the central domain was also constantly searching for Chu Chun's whereabouts. This person was Clear Wind Sword Immortal. During this past month, he had been searching for Chu Chun's whereabouts in the central domain. At the same time, during this month, he had also heard about the events that transpired at Tianxian Holy Land. At first, he was somewhat surprised by what happened at Tianxian Holy Land. However, after the surprise, he didn't pay attention to the events between the underworld and Tianxian Holy Land. All he wanted to do was find his disciple. Yet, after searching for a whole month, he still hadn't found his disciple. Of course, besides this month, he had also been searching for his disciple during the preceding period. Did the power of time from the Supreme Bone push you into other domains? Clear Wind Sword Immortal raised his head at this moment, looking thoughtfully at the sky, his eyes filled with urgency and hope. If Chu Chun and the others had appeared in other domains at this time, then they should not be in too much danger. After all, apart from the central domain, the strongest experts in other places were at most great saint-level experts, while the guardian he had assigned to Chu Chun had already reached the late Saint King. Those great saint-level experts couldn't always appear in the outside world, so if Chu Chun landed in other places, he might be safe. Of course, these were all Clear Wind Sword Immortal's conjectures, as it didn't know at this time that the guardian's cultivation had fallen to the entering saint realm. Chapter 493, The Joyful Protectors Upon Receiving the News. While Clear Wind Sword Immortal was continuously searching for his disciple's whereabouts, Chu Chun's guardian also appeared in the city. However, he appeared to be very cautious at this time. After all, he knew that Tianxian Holy Land was recently hunting his young lord, so he naturally did not dare to reveal his face to the public. Then, the guardian went straight into a tavern. He quietly ordered a table of food and drinks, then began to enjoy them. At the same time, he was also listening intently to the discussions among the surrounding cultivators. Having recovered to the perfected saint realm, the guardian could easily hear the discussions of these cultivators. Initially, the cultivators' discussions were very ordinary, just talking about everyday events, which, of course, was of no use to the guardian. After all, these things were not very important to him. However, he soon heard the result he wanted, and a voice that did not surprise him too much slowly entered his ears. Alas, I wonder where the former saint of Tianxian Holy Land is now. If we knew his current location, we would definitely strike it rich. Upon hearing this, the guardian began to conceal his presence, evidently still believing that Tianxian Holy Land's hunt order was ongoing. However, he intended to continue listening, so he gazed thoughtfully at the group of cultivators before him. The highest realm of these cultivators was only the king realm, so they naturally did not know that they were being watched by a powerful expert in the perfected saint realm. Who says it isn't so? Now the entire central domain is searching for the former saint, Chu Chun, but if you ask me, the one most worried about Chu Chun's safety now is probably Tianxian Holy Land. After the previous cultivator's words fell, another cultivator slowly stood up and spoke to the cultivators present. As he spoke, there was no fear of offending Tianxian Holy Land on his face. Instead, there was a hint of schadenfreude. Chu Chun's guardian was instantly stunned upon hearing this cultivator's words, and he felt a great deal of confusion in his heart. The previous sentence was not difficult to understand. However, the guardian felt that Tianxian Holy Land should not be worried about Chu Chun's danger. After all, they had already issued a hunt order against them, so how could they be worried about their danger? Thinking of this, the guardian eagerly continued to listen. At this moment, he wished he could directly take the several people in front of him and force them to reveal what had happened during this period. This is not Tianxian Holy Land's own doing, but it cannot be blamed on them. After all, no one knew that Chu Chun actually had such a powerful background. If they had known, how would they have dared to covet Chu Chun's supreme bone? And just as the guardian was listening, truly useful information came from the mouth of a cultivator. After this cultivator finished speaking, his eyes still held a hint of shock and surprise. During this time, these cultivators had also received news about the massive power behind Chu Chun. Chu Chun's guardian instantly frowned upon hearing about the power behind Chu Chun. As Chu Chun's guardian from childhood, He naturally knew that Chu Chun did not have a significant background, but he never expected that it was now being said that Chu Chun had a powerful force behind him, so much so that even Tianqian Holy Land was wary, which instantly surprised the Guardian. Then he continued to prick up his ears and listen to the discussions of the several cultivators nearby. No matter how powerful Tianqian Holy Land is, how could it be an opponent of the underworld? Moreover, Chu Chun is the elder brother of that mysterious young master of the underworld, so Tianqian Holy Land probably hopes that this mysterious young master of the underworld can find their former saint at this time. I heard that the underworld has not been carrying out assassination missions recently. They are all looking for clues related to Chu Chun, and it probably won't be long before they find him. Alas, indeed, some people are born in Rome, while others are born as oxen and horses. Even if Chu Chun is no longer the saint of Tianqian Holy Land, he is still the elder brother of the mysterious young master of the underworld. His background in the underworld is probably no weaker than in Tianqian Holy Land. This mysterious young master can mobilize an alternative path to enlightenment existence. So how could Chu Chun's status be low when he goes to the underworld? What kind of existence can he mobilize in Tianqian Holy Land? The subsequent discussions of these cultivators all fell into the Guardian's ears. After listening to these discussions, the Guardian's face showed an incredible expression. At the same time, his eyes occasionally glanced at his storage ring. He never expected that his young lord had such a powerful existence behind him. At the same time, he also heard about the changes of this month from these cultivators' mouths. First, this mysterious young master of the underworld directly led the underworld's assassins to attack Tianqian Holy Land. Then Tianqian Holy Land directly showed weakness to this mysterious young master. Tianqian Holy Land even handed over all the members of a Xian family to this mysterious young master of the underworld for disposal. As a Saint-King level existence in the Holy Land, the Guardian naturally understood that Tianqian Holy Land would absolutely not make such a choice unless it was the final moment. So, at this moment, the Guardian finally understood the power of the underworld. At the same time, he also understood that his young lord no longer needed to hide. It could even be said that his young lord could go directly to the underworld. Thinking of this, an excited expression appeared on his face. Originally, he had planned to find Clear Wind Sword Immortal to treat his young lord these past few days. But from the words of these cultivators, he could tell. The best course of action now was to find this mysterious young master of the underworld, then hand his young lord over to this mysterious young master. As his young lord's younger brother, this mysterious young master would definitely treat his young lord. After all, in such a situation, perhaps only this mysterious young master of the underworld could save his young lord. Because Chu Chun's injuries were too severe now. It could even be said that Chu Chun had no vitality left in his body. Only a faint trace of vitality still flowed in his chest. Otherwise, even the Guardian would have thought that Chu Chun had already fallen. Thus, upon learning this news, Chu Chun's Guardian immediately headed towards the top cities. He wanted to find the underworld, or at least find the assassins of the underworld. Only in this way could he follow these assassins of the underworld to the underworld. While the Guardian was now searching in the direction of the underworld, Chu Fan's side also received news from the Eastern Domain. Chapter 494 News from the Eastern region arrives. Chu Fan finally meets Chu Chun. Looking at the letter in his hand, Chu Fan fell into deep thought. He hadn't expected to receive such news before even finding his elder brother's whereabouts. At the same time, Chu Fan felt a bit helpless. If he had known earlier that taking down the western and southern regions would lead to such an incident, he probably would have had his army slowed down in conquering them. However, Chu Fan did not intend to return to the eastern region immediately, as he planned to stay here for 2 more days. This was because the underworld had almost finished searching the central region, and specific news would be available in just a few days at most. If the underworld couldn't obtain this information within these few days, then perhaps his elder brother had been transported to other places due to the power of time and space. And these other places were precisely within his, Chu Fan's, domain, making it easier for him to find his elder brother. Therefore, Chu Fan decided to wait for these last few days. However, what Chu Fan didn't know was that this decision would lead him to his elder brother. As a few days quickly passed, Chu Chun's Guardian finally contacted the underworld. And Chu Chun's Guardian, after contacting the underworld, was now following the underworld assassins, heading towards the underworld summons. At this moment, Chu Fan, who was contemplating whether to go to the central region within the underworld, also had a look of helplessness on his face. However, after a moment of struggle, he still decided to go to the eastern region, although his elder brother was indeed important to him. But the Great Xia Dynasty was the foundation he had built, and Chu Fan naturally couldn't allow the Great Xia Dynasty to be destroyed because of his elder brother's situation. After all, the Great Xia Dynasty bore the luck of the entire Chu family. In the future, whether it was Chu Yanran or Chu Wushuang, they would need the great Xia dynasty's luck for their transition. Subsequently, he slowly walked out of the underworld. But just then, Wang Chongyang quickly arrived by his side. Wang Chongyang's face carried a hint of joy. Seeing this, Chu Fan immediately stopped, and at the same time, he had some conjectures in his heart. So, he leisurely waited for Wang Chongyang to approach him. Reporting to the emperor, we have found the whereabouts of the eldest young master. Moreover, it is the eldest young master's guardian who is escorting him. Within a day at most, the eldest young master and his guardian will appear in the underworld. Wang Chongyang did not hesitate at this moment and directly reported the news received by the underworld to Chu Fan. Chu Fan, who was originally planning to return to the eastern region, showed a smile on her face after hearing Wang Chongyang's words. She then immediately stopped in her tracks. Then, she directly waved her hand at Wang Chongyang and, without any surprise, entered the underworld. Since he already had his elder brother's whereabouts, he naturally wouldn't mind waiting for 1 or 2 more days. As Chu Fan returned to the underworld to await his elder brother's whereabouts, on the other side, Chu Chen's guardian was also following the underworld assassins, heading towards the underworld's direction. Soon, this guardian arrived outside the underworld. Looking at this colossal entity, an unprecedented shock appeared on the guardian's face. He hadn't expected the underworld to be here, and he also hadn't expected the underworld station to be so terrifying. Even the Tianxian Holy Land probably didn't have such tall buildings. More importantly, the underworld looked incredibly grand, and within this grandeur, there was also a terrifying ancientness mixed in. It was as if an ancient power had reappeared in this world. The moment he appeared outside the underworld, Chu Fan, who was inside the underworld, instantly opened his eyes. This was because he also sensed the aura outside, which did not belong to the underworld. However, Chu Fan did not intend to go out and meet this guardian at this moment. Instead, he waited for the underworld's assassins to bring him. Soon, this guardian followed the underworld assassins and walked into the underworld. After quite a while, the underworld assassins finally brought this guardian before Wang Chongyang. Wang Chongyang looked at the guardian before him, and a frown appeared on his face, but at this moment he said nothing. Instead, he slowly waved his hand at the guardian. Then, he directly led the guardian to the top floor. Soon, Wang Chongyang led the guardian to the outside of the room where Chu Fan was. It was more accurate to call it a grand hall than a room, because although it was merely a room, its space was larger than an ordinary grand hall. Upon arriving here, Wang Chongyang respectfully saluted Chu Fan. Reporting to the emperor, we have brought the person. Then, Wang Chongyang waved his hand at the guardian beside him, and only then did he look at Chu Fan. Are you my elder brother's guardian? Looking at the saint entry-level middle-aged man before him, a golden light appeared in his eyes. In just a moment, Chu Fan's golden pupils had already discerned the guardian's condition. At this moment, the power of time on the guardian's body was incredibly terrifying, constantly eroding his body. Fortunately, it was suppressed by the guardian's powerful strength. This was also why he was able to recover to the perfected saint realm. I am indeed the young master's guardian. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, the guardian spoke to Chu Fan with a terrified expression, and at the same time, he also felt a terrifying pressure. This terrifying pressure made him feel as if he was prostrate on the ground. At this moment, he finally understood how powerful his young lord's mysterious younger brother was. He had probably far surpassed Clear Wind Sword Immortal. Where is my elder brother now? However, Chu Fan did not intend to continue chatting with this guardian at this moment. Instead, he frowned and directly questioned him. But at this moment, Chu Fan indeed had a bad premonition in his heart. The young lord is right in here. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, the guardian hurriedly took out the profound ice coffin from his storage ring. And at this moment, Chu Chen's figure, lying inside the profound ice coffin, also appeared in everyone's line of sight. At this moment, Chu Chen had white hair and no aura whatsoever, as if he had completely fallen. The moment Chu Fan saw Chu Chen inside the profound ice coffin, the great sage perfection realm aura on his body could no longer be suppressed. He looked at the profound ice coffin before him with extreme anger. He hadn't expected his elder brother to be reduced to this state, and Wang Chongyang, at this moment, somewhat helplessly protected the guardian. After all, no matter what, he had brought their eldest young master back. Chapter 495 Return to the Eastern Region, the glory of the Qilin Chariot. As the aura on Chu Fan's body erupted, several Quasi-Emperor Realm experts from the underworld appeared in his great hall. At the same time, these Quasi-Emperor Realm experts all turned their gazes toward Chu Chen inside the profound ice coffin. Chu Chen's appearance resembled Chu Fan by about 40 or 50%, so they recognized his identity with just a single glance. Thus, They looked at their emperor with a hint of surprise. Emperor, he still has a trace of vitality on his body. This vitality is continuously repairing his body. Perhaps it won't take long for his vitality to be fully restored. As an alternative Dao attainer, Chuaning naturally saw Chu Chen's problem immediately. He quickly stepped forward and reported to Chu Fan. After speaking, he continued to study the aura surrounding Chu Chen's body. Upon hearing his words, Chu Fan retracted the aura around his body, and then slowly looked toward Chu Chen's chest. At this moment, he also discovered a faint vitality continuously spreading within Chu Chen's chest. Although this trace of vitality was extremely weak, it was remarkably tenacious. It was only because Chu Fan hadn't looked closely the first time he saw his older brother lying in the crystal coffin. Otherwise, he would have noticed this trace of vitality long ago. How long will it take for him to recover in this state? Chu Fan then slowly turned his gaze toward his older brother and, without raising his head, inquired of Chuaning beside him. Based on the speed at which this trace of vitality is spreading, it will take the eldest young master at least 100 years to recover. However, if he is placed inside the time pagoda, the eldest young master would likely only need a few years to recover. Chuaning naturally understood Chu Chen's condition instantly, so he slowly spoke to Chu Fan. Recovery would take 100 years in the outside world, but if he were inside the time pagoda, it would likely only take a few years. After all, the time pagoda has a flow rate 10 times faster than the outside world. Moreover, the spiritual power inside the time pagoda is also stronger than the outside world. In that case, let's settle him inside the time pagoda for now. Chu Fan understood after hearing Chuanying's words, and he waved his hand with a hint of helplessness. Then, with a wave of his hand, he moved Chu Chun and the profound ice coffin entirely into the time pagoda. Emperor, now that the eldest young master's matter has been handled, shouldn't we return now? Chuaning naturally knew about the situation concerning the Great Xia dynasty, so he spoke to Chu Fan with a solemn expression. After all, they could not afford to delay any longer. If they continued to delay, the luck of the Great Xia dynasty would only be lost further. Let's go. Wang Chongyang, I leave him to you. As long as his conditions do not violate the rules of my underworld, grant them to him. Chu Fan instantly understood after hearing his words. Chu Fan slowly looked toward Wang Chongyang beside him and gave him instructions. After giving his instructions, Chu Fan headed directly out of the underworld. At the same time, his Qilin war chariot was already waiting for him outside. In the next second, he leaped up and landed directly on the Qilin war chariot. Simultaneously, the Qilin war chariot instantly streaked across the sky as a golden beam of light and vanished from the underworld. Of course, many underworld assassins surrounded the Qilin war chariot. However, the assassins accompanying Chu Fan to the eastern region, this time with a top assassin summoned from the Shadow Legion. Soon, the Qilin war chariot streaked across the sky above the central region. Because the Qilin war chariot did not stop at all this time. Therefore, only a golden streak of light was seen cutting through the sky above the central region. Naturally, those top experts knew what this golden streak of light represented. However, they did not intend to investigate this golden streak of light. After all, there were quasi-emperors an alternative path to enlightenment existences accompanying them. How could cultivators of the Saint King, or even Great Saint Realm dare to pursue their trail? As for Xiao Zi, who had followed Chu Fan out of the Tianxian Holy Land, because her cultivation was too weak, she went directly into the Time Pagoda to cultivate. She also resolved not to emerge until she broke through to the entering Saint Realm. This was why she was not accompanying Chu Fan. The Golden Qilin war chariot was extremely fast. In just a few days, he had already crossed the entire central region and arrived at its edge. After spending a few more days, they arrived directly in the eastern region. Of course, this was all because the Qilin pulling the Qilin war chariot had already reached the Great Saint Realm. Otherwise, how could their speed be so fast? The moment Chu Fan arrived in the eastern region, he felt a terrifying aura. This was the aura of luck unique to their Great Xia dynasty. At the same time, this was the aura of the Golden Dragon of Destiny, the true foundation of the Great Xia dynasty. Moreover, the moment Chu Fan stepped into the eastern region, a feeling of extreme intimacy appeared on his body. However, he did not choose to stop at this moment. Instead, he drove the Qilin war chariot directly toward Chang'an City. The Qilin war chariot was very fast, but Chang'an City was, after all, located right in the center of the eastern region. Furthermore, the eastern region was now extremely vast. Therefore, it took Chu Fan quite a while to finally reach Chang'an City. As the golden streak of light from the Qilin war chariot cut through the eastern region's sky, a golden radiance instantly appeared in the sky above the eastern region. All the cultivators who saw this scene focused their gaze on the golden light in the sky, because they all knew that this golden light represented the arrival of their emperor. Thus, Many cultivators looked with pious eyes toward the direction from which the golden light was approaching. The golden light quickly entered Chang'an City, and without any pause, it headed straight for the Imperial Palace in Chang'an City. The guards of Chang'an City's Imperial Palace, naturally, did not obstruct this golden light. Therefore, Chu Fan, riding the Qilin war chariot, quickly appeared inside the Imperial Palace. At this moment, the Heavenly Secret Master also appeared in the Imperial Palace, waiting for Chu Fan's arrival. He watched the figures beside Chu Fan, whose auras were already terrifying, with a serious look in his eyes. The Heavenly Secret Master naturally sensed the cultivation of these experts belonging to the Quasi-Emperor realm. He hadn't expected Chu Fan to have so many Quasi-Emperor realm experts accompanying him. However, after only a brief glance, he focused his attention on Chuan Ying's body, because Chuan Ying exerted an unprecedented pressure on him. Chapter 496. The Chu family members knew about Chu Chen's situation. Chu Chun inside the Xianbing coffin. Chu Fan's arrival naturally didn't just attract the attention of Heavenly Secret Master. Chu Tianxiong and the others from the Prince of Zhenbai's estate were also present. In particular, Chu Tianxiong kept sizing up Chu Fan's surroundings. When he realized that Chu Fan had returned alone, a trace of sadness appeared on Chu Tianxiong's face. At the same time, he had a guess in his heart. Although he felt extremely sad at this moment, he didn't show it. Since the sovereign has returned, this subordinate will immediately go prepare matters concerning the advancement to empire. Heavenly Secret Master was very tactful at this moment. He didn't intend to continue disturbing Chu Fan's family here. Instead, he cupped his hands toward Chu Fan and left the premises. Of course, he had already prepared most of the matters regarding the advancement to empire. He only needed to wait for his own sovereign to return and set a time. Upon hearing Heavenly Secret Master's words, Chu Fan nodded silently, then slowly turned his gaze toward Chu Tianxiong. Then Chu Fan nodded at Chu Tianxiong. Greetings, grandfather, elder Jia, royal father, royal mother. Chu Fan slowly stepped forward, cupping his hands toward Chu Long and the others as he spoke. Chu Long and the others also nodded at Chu Fan at this moment. The two little ones peered out from behind Luo Tianyi and the other person, their eyes fixed on Chu Fan with excitement. Seeing the two little ones like this, Chu Fan waved at them. Immediately after, the two little ones ran towards Chu Fan with smiles on their faces. In particular, Chu Yanran leaped directly into Chu Fan's arms. Chu Wushuang, however, stopped when he reached Chu Fan's side, then raised his head to look at Chu Fan. His pair of small eyes were filled with adoration. Greetings, Imperial Father. At the same time, Chu Wushuang spoke to Chu Fan with a serious expression, his tender voice instantly reaching the ears of everyone present. Although Chu Wushuang was still young, he currently acted like a small adult. As for Chu Yanran, she was giggling happily in Chu Fan's embrace. Now that you've returned, you should be able to tell us what you went out to do this time. Although you and Chu Tianxiong kept it a secret from us, how could this old man not know? Both of you were raised by this old man. At this moment, Chu Long slowly walked forward and jokingly scolded Chu Fan, yet a hint of sorrow could be seen on his face. Clearly, he also had some suspicions in his heart. After all, Chu Tianxiong and Chu Fan were both people he watched grow up, so it was naturally very difficult for the two of them to hide things from him. Upon hearing Chu Long's words, Feng Shiran instantly cast her gaze upon Chu Fan, and her eyes held a trace of worry. Only Chu Tianxiong wore an unnatural expression on his face at this moment. Grandfather, let's return to the Prince of Zhenbai's estate first. I will tell you what happened during this time, once we are inside. Chu Fan naturally hadn't thought of hiding anything from his grandfather, so he spoke slowly to him. After finishing, he led Chu Wushuang and carried Chu Yanran as he walked toward the Prince of Zhenbai's estate. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, Chu Long and the others followed Chu Fan toward the Prince of Zhenbai's estate without any hesitation. Of course, Qing Yao and Luo Tianyi also came to Chu Fan's side at this moment. The two of them followed Chu Fan toward the Prince of Zhenbai's estate, and their eyes also held a trace of worry. Soon, everyone arrived inside the Prince of Zhenbai's estate. The Prince of Zhenbai's estate was originally located within the Imperial Palace, so it was naturally not difficult for them to enter. After arriving inside the estate, Chu Long looked toward Chu Fan with a sense of urgency. The others also turned their gazes toward Chu Fan. The main reason I went to the Central Region this time was indeed for my elder brother. Something happened to him in the Central Region. To prevent grandfather and the rest of you from worrying, I went to the Central Region alone, but I did discuss it with Royal Father before I left. Seeing everyone's eyes on him, Chu Fan slowly explained the reason for his departure. As soon as his voice fell, Chu Long instantly looked toward him. At the same time, the worry in his eyes intensified. At this moment, he had a bad premonition in his heart. Although he knew at first that Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong were hiding something from him, But he hadn't expected that what Chu Fan and Chu Tianxiong were hiding concerned Chu Qin. Even Chu Fan's royal mother had a look of worry on her face at this moment. A shadow also appeared in Chu Tianxiong's eyes. "What is your elder brother's condition now?" Then, Chu Tianxiong slowly stepped out, looked at Chu Fan, and spoke. However, his gaze held a trace of hope. Clearly, he didn't want anything to happen to his eldest son. After hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, Chu Long and the others also turned their gazes toward Chu Fan. Elder brother's current situation is not very good. Upon hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, Chu Fan sighed helplessly, then slowly spoke to Chu Long and Chu Tianxiong. After speaking, he slowly waved his hand. The next second, a terrifying cold aura instantly swept through the entire courtyard. At the same time, a profound ice coffin instantly appeared before everyone. The figure inside the profound ice coffin was naturally seen by everyone present. Looking at that familiar figure, Chu Tianxiong could no longer hold back. He cautiously approached the profound ice coffin, looking at the white-haired figure inside the profound ice coffin with heartache and anger in his eyes. As for Feng Shiran beside him, her eyes were wide open at this moment. She couldn't believe that her eldest son had actually ended up like this. A sorrowful aura instantly emanated from Chu Tianxiong and the others. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they looked at the figure inside the profound ice coffin. The matter of elder brother possessing the Supreme Bone was exposed in the Holy Land, so the Xin family faction within the Holy Land wanted to seize elder brother's Supreme Bone. To prevent the Supreme Bone from falling into their hands, elder brother self-detonated the Supreme Bone and fell into the River of Time. Now, due to the power of time within the River of Time, it is very difficult for him to recover. However, I have now found a place where elder brother can recover. In just a few years at most, he will be able to fully recover. Seeing everyone so sad, Chu Fan quickly stepped forward and spoke again. At the same time, he immediately informed everyone of the news that Chu Chun could recover. Otherwise, they would likely become even more heartbroken. The anger and heartache that originally filled Chu Tianxiong's face instantly turned into raging fury. Chapter 497, Chu Chen's Recovery Time. Preparations for advancing to an empire. At the same time, he was also glad that Chu Fan could find a place for Chu Chun to recover. However, the anger on his face had not dissipated at this moment. Are the enemies who attacked Shao Chun this time very strong? Then, Chu Tianxiong slowly spoke, his voice filled with unconcealed anger. So much so that everyone present could hear the fury in his tone. Chu Long also slowly raised his head and looked at Chu Fan. All the enemies who attacked my brother have been dealt with by me, but their strength was indeed not weak. Chu Fan naturally knew what his father meant, so he slowly waved his hand and said. After speaking, he slowly turned his gaze towards his mother. At this moment, Chu Fan only hoped that his family could accept this matter. How long will it take for Shao Chun to recover now? After hearing Chu Fan's words, Chu Long instantly understood. He gently stroked the profound ice coffin with his finger, then slowly continued to speak. At the same time, after saying this, a hint of sadness appeared in Chu Long's eyes. If he had not agreed to his grandson going to the central domain back then, such a thing would probably not have happened to his grandson. Thinking of this, he still felt some self-blame. However, there was nothing he could do about it. After all, if he had not sent Chu Chen away back then, it would have been extremely difficult to save Chu Chen's life. If in an ordinary place, my brother would need 100 years to recover, but in the Time Pagoda, he should only need a few years to recover. After hearing Chu Long's words, Chu Fan spoke without any concealment. After speaking, he also slowly turned his gaze towards the figure in the profound ice coffin. This figure was very familiar in his mind, but he did not expect to see his brother again in such a situation. Since he only needs a few years to recover, then let your brother recover first. Your most important task now is to stabilize the Empire's luck. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, Chu Tianxiong instantly understood. He waved his hand at Chu Fan and said. During this time, he had also learned from Heavenly Secret Master how important the Empire's luck was. If the Empire's luck could not be stabilized, it would affect his grandson in the future. He did not want to see his grandson and granddaughter struggle to grow due to the influence of the Empire's luck. Of course, in reality, the influence of the Empire's luck was not very great. After all, if Chu Fan wanted them to grow, it certainly wouldn't be that difficult. However, the Empire's luck was indeed very important to Chu Fan, because he needed the Empire's luck to elevate the Great Xia Dynasty to the Great Xia Empire. At that time, the Great Xia Empire could successfully enter the Central Domain. Then, it would sweep across the entire Central Domain. After successfully subjugating the Central Domain, Chu Fan's Great Xia Empire could become the only true nation between heaven and earth. At that time, he could become a human emperor like the former Xianyuan human emperor and then use the human emperor law to become a top expert of the heavenly emperor realm. One must know that ordinary top experts of the great emperor realm are called great emperors, but those who become top experts of the great emperor realm by utilizing the human emperor law are called human emperors or heavenly emperors, because their strength has far surpassed that of ordinary true top experts of the great emperor realm. Even those great emperor realm top experts who have lived for several generations cannot compare to them. This is also why the human emperor fate rarely appears. Moreover, every prodigy who could break through to the great emperor realm was once an unparalleled prodigy. Therefore, the human emperor fate is so terrifying. Your child plans to spend 3 days resolving internal matters of the dynasty, and then directly advance to the Great Xia Empire after 3 days. Chu Fan naturally understood Chu Tianxiong's meaning, so he slowly spoke to Chu Tianxiong. Next, Chu Tianxiong and the others also chatted with Chu Fan for a while about Chu Chen's situation, and then they directly let Chu Fan take Chu Chen away. In the following few days, Chu Fan was very calm, as there were so many experts in the dynasty. So, preparing to advance to an empire naturally did not require him. Of course, in the following few days, the news of advancing to an empire also spread throughout the entire eastern domain, and was even continuously spreading to other places. After all, now, besides the central domain, all other territories belonged to the Great Xia dynasty. Upon learning that Chang'an City was going to host the promotion of the Great Xia dynasty to the Great Xia Empire, the top experts within the Great Xia dynasty were all continuously rushing towards Chang'an City. I didn't expect our Great Xia dynasty to advance to the Great Xia Empire so quickly. At that time, we will also be cultivators of the Great Xia Empire. I'd like to see who dares to provoke us. The emperor is indeed a prodigy rarely seen in millions of years. He can advance to the Great Xia Empire in just a few years. After successfully becoming the Great Xia Empire, our cultivation speed will also be faster. Yes, it seems that it won't be long before I can break through to the true king realm. This is a realm I never dared to dream of before. Who says it isn't? I have already break through to the king realm now. Alas, poor me, I'm still in the Dharma aspect realm. I hope the emperor's advancement to an empire this time can help me break through. The cultivators in the Great Xia dynasty who knew about this news were all discussing it. These cultivators' former wish was to be able to break through to the Dharma aspect realm, which would have been great. However, they did not expect that Chu Fan had made the spiritual qi of the eastern domain incredibly powerful in just a few years, which also led to their respective breakthroughs in cultivation. Many people's cultivation even directly break through to the true king realm. One must know that this was a realm they never dared to dream of before. And those former top experts of the eastern domain had already breakthrough to the entering saint realm. This was already the spiritual qi changing them, rather than them achieving results through cultivating with spiritual qi. Therefore, the advancement of the Great Xia dynasty this time made them overjoyed. If this advancement could raise their cultivation once again, then their future lives would be even better. Moreover, for cultivators, every slight improvement later on increases their lifespan significantly. Therefore, they were naturally overjoyed. Of course, at this time, many cultivators were also rushing towards Chang'an City. They wanted to see what kind of magnificent ruler this emperor who established the Great Xia dynasty truly was. At the same time, they also wanted to see the true prodigies of the Great Xia dynasty. After all, most of the true prodigies of the Great Xia dynasty came from Chang'an City, so they naturally wanted to see the true prodigies of the Great Xia dynasty. Of course, many people also want to see the peerless generals of the Great Xia dynasty. Chapter 498, The 6 Great Commanders of the Great Xia Dynasty. Powerful figures appear one after another. Just as many cultivators were rushing toward Chang'an City, the area outside Chang'an City was also extremely lively. This was because the Great Xia Dynasty was about to advance to become the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, armies that had rarely appeared within the Great Xia Dynasty were now showing up in Chang'an City one after another. Due to the spiritual qi recovery in the eastern region, the current area of Chang'an City was already dozens of times larger than when it was first established. After continuous modifications by the peak experts Chu Fan had summoned, the 4 city gates of Chang'an City now looked incredibly magnificent. Each city gate was several hundred zhang tall, making many cultivators standing below look like ants. And the ones guarding the 4 city gates this time were the 4 great generals under Chu Fan. Among them, guarding the north gate, was Lu Bu, a peak general who had already achieved a breakthrough to the Great Sage Perfection realm. At the same time, Lu Bu was now also known as the Demon God General throughout the Great Xia Dynasty. This title felt very fitting for him. After all, Lu Bu himself resembled a demon god. Guarding the south gate was Zhao Zilong, the white-robed general. Zhao Zilong, like Lu Bu, had also achieved a breakthrough to the Great Sage Perfection realm, because he wore a silver-white robe and also donned bright silver armor during battle. Thus, he was known as the white-robed general. This was not much different from the former White Horse general. Guarding the west gate was Dian Wei. Although his cultivation level was currently inferior to Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong, having already reached the late-stage Great Sage, he was more than sufficient to guard the west gate. As for the guard of Chang'an City's east gate, that was Su Chu. Just like Dian Wei, he had achieved a breakthrough to the late-stage Great Sage, so it was perfectly normal for him to be guarding the east gate at this time. Aside from the 4 great generals guarding the 4 major gates, Luo Cheng was also leading troops to constantly patrol the imperial city, especially the 18 riders of Yan Yun accompanying him. The 18 riders of Yan Yun had all reached the Saint King realm, making them naturally dazzling as they followed Luo Cheng. Guarding the imperial palace were Xiang Yu, the former He Jimin king of the ages, and Li Yuanba, the foremost figure in the Sui and Tang world. Both of their strengths had reached the astonishing Great Sage Perfection realm, and they had achieved the breakthrough to the Great Sage Perfection realm even before Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu. Therefore, their current strength was considered peak existence throughout the Great Xia dynasty. With the 2 of them guarding the entire imperial palace, the whole palace became extremely secure. As for Pei Yuanqing, he was guarding the prince of Zhenbai's estate. Since his strength had already reached the late-stage Great Sage, guarding the entire prince of Zhenbai's estate was sufficient. As 3 days slowly passed, a massive altar appeared in the center of Chang'an City, surrounded by numerous armies. These armies stood in 2 rows, encircling the altar. At the same time, the qi emanating from these armies was chilling, because the Great Xia dynasty was about to be promoted to the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, the Great Xia dynasty's peak general stationed elsewhere had also returned to Chang'an City. Standing at the front of the troops were the commanders of the respective armies, including Yu Fei, the commander of the Yu family army. At this moment, Yu Fei's face was beaming with a joyous smile, and the aura of his great saint realm was faintly emanating from him. Standing beside Yu Fei was Qin Xiong. Although Qin Xiong's cultivate speed could not compare to Luo Cheng and others, he had successfully achieved a breakthrough to the early-stage Great Sage. Furthermore, and most importantly, Qin Xiong far surpassed Luo Cheng and the others in his ability to lead troops, so his most crucial skill lay in commanding. Next to Qin Xiong stood Yang Yi. His strength was not particularly powerful, having only reached the Saint King consummation realm. Compared to Qin Xiong and Yu Fei, he was slightly inferior, but the strength of the 7 generals of the Yang family had reached the astonishing Great Saint realm. Even the weakest among the 7 generals of the Yang family was currently at the Saint King consummation realm. Therefore, even though Yang Yi, who commanded an army, was only at the Saint King consummation realm, he was still considered a formidable existence compared to other armies. Standing beside Yang Yi was Chun Jibao, the White Horse and Silver Spear. His cultivate talent far exceeded others, meaning he had already reached the Great Sage Perfection realm. Moreover, the Great Snow Dragon cavalry he led was currently the strongest army in the Great Xia dynasty. As for the young general standing beside him, the aura emanating from him had already reached the Great Saint realm. Furthermore, he could faintly contend with the aura emanating from Chun Jibao. This person was Hua Xiubing, whom Chu Fan had summoned later, the marquee champion Hua Xiubing from the Great Han dynasty. He currently looked high-spirited and vigorous, appearing like a general who had never known defeat. The Great Han Iron Cavalry behind him also emitted a terrifying aura. Standing next to Hua Xiubing was Meng Tian, the Great Qin Iron Cavalry general. He wore dark black battle armor and looked incredibly majestic. At the same time, the qi emanating from the Great Qin Iron Cavalry behind him was also extremely powerful. Of course, the most terrifying thing was that within this Great Qin Iron Cavalry, there was also a contingent of Iron Cavalry wearing golden armor. They were the Great Qin Golden Fire Cavalry. These 6 great commanders were the current peak commanders of the Great Xia dynasty, as each of them commanded an army. Moreover, the Great Xia dynasty, having such vast territory, was inseparable from their efforts. They were currently staring at the altar ahead with fervent eyes, and right in front of the altar were many figures standing. The figure standing closest to the altar was clad in a white robe, exuding terrifying Tao fortune, while also bearing a confident smile. This person was the god king Jiang Taishu. Through cultivate during this period, he had successfully achieved a breakthrough in his cultivation to the quasi-emperor early stage. Originally meant to be in the underworld, he had followed Chu Fan's Qilin war chariot back to the Great Xia dynasty, allowing him to participate when the Great Xia dynasty advanced to the Great Xia Empire. Standing beside the god, King Jiang Taishu, was a somewhat inconspicuous middle-aged man, who was also faintly emitting waves of alcohol qi. He looked like an alcoholic. However, upon closer inspection, one could find that the aura emanating from him had reached the great sage perfection realm. This person was the Wine Sword Immortal, whom Chu Fan had summoned. The Wine Sword Immortal had rarely appeared since Chu Fan summoned him. However, during this period, he had been constantly cultivating inside the Time Pagoda. This was why his cultivation had reached such a height. Furthermore, the Wine Sword Immortal was naturally capable of growing stronger by drinking alcohol, so his cultivation achieving a breakthrough to this level was considered normal. Chapter 499. Chu Fan, clad in a dragon robe, and Chu Wushuang and others arrive. As for the one beside the Wine Sword Immortal, it was Ji Haoyue. Having been summoned, he had been cultivating inside the Time Pagoda, so he had now also reached the Great Sage Perfection Realm. And standing around them were many strong experts at the Great Sage Perfection Realm. It can be said that the current strength of the Great Xia Dynasty has far surpassed the average forces in the Central Region. This is also why Chu Fan dared to directly declare war on the Tianxian Holy Land. Since the strength of the Great Xia Dynasty has already reached this level, why would Chu Fan fear them? As for the cultivation of the few people standing in the center of the altar, they had all reached the quasi-emperor realm. Among them, Chuaning stood at the very front, gazing calmly at the altar before him, as his cultivation had already reached the level of the alternative path to enlightenment. Therefore, there was not much fluctuation on his face. Beside him were Fei Peng and the demon Venerable Chonglu. Both of their cultivations had reached the peak quasi-emperor realm, making them the second strongest experts of the Great Xia Dynasty. Other than them, no one else stood in the center of the altar. Chu Fan had summoned these three because of the Great Xia Dynasty's advancement this time. As for the others, they did not appear around the altar. After all, the underworld still needed to operate. Therefore, the underworld also needed a strong expert at the quasi-emperor level to hold down the fort. And those strong experts at the quasi-emperor level were all left in the underworld. Of course, having these three was enough for the Great Xia Dynasty. The three of them alone could sweep aside all strong experts at the quasi-emperor level. After all, the strength of the demon Venerable Chonglu and the other person had reached such a terrifying level. Although the strength of the demon Venerable Chonglu and the other person was only at the peak quasi-emperor realm, but the combat power of the two of them already surpassed that of an ordinary peak quasi-emperor realm expert. And Chuaning had reached the level of the alternative path to enlightenment, as long as those strong experts at the supreme being level in the restricted zones did not appear. Then, having these three within the Great Xia Dynasty meant they were an invincible existence. At this time, the common people and cultivators of Chang'an City all focused their gaze toward the altar, because they all knew that the location where the Great Xia Dynasty needed to advance to the Great Xia Empire was right here. At the same time, they also knew that with the Great Xia Dynasty advancing its realm to the Great Xia Empire, their emperor would appear. Therefore, many cultivators were now looking towards the altar with expectation in their eyes. They were also waiting for the appearance of their emperor. As time slowly passed, a powerful aura appeared above the altar. Moreover, a golden dragon seemed to be continuously circling between heaven and earth at this moment. This was precisely the golden dragon of destiny of the Great Xia Dynasty. After about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, an imperial Dao aura was felt coming from afar. Following this, a Qilin war chariot was seen slowly driving over from afar. The aura emanating from the Qilin war chariot astonished everyone present. At this moment, the Qilin war chariot revealed its true appearance. Normally, the Qilin war chariot's decorations were not so luxurious, as it needed to move quickly. But now, the Qilin war chariot was decorated extremely luxuriously. At the same time, golden-colored Grand Dao paths strolled beside the Qilin war chariot. The Qilin war chariot seemed to be driving right within the Grand Dao, making the entire Qilin war chariot dazzling. The Qilin war chariot continued to pass through the crowd. Soon, the Qilin war chariot arrived directly in the center of the army. Then, under the gaze of the crowd, it headed straight toward the altar. In just a moment, the Qilin war chariot appeared below the altar. After the Qilin war chariot appeared below the altar, the generals and soldiers below all focused their gaze upon the Qilin war chariot. Following this, a figure was seen slowly walking out from inside the Qilin war chariot. This figure wore a golden-colored robe, upon which was carved a lifelike golden-colored giant dragon. This lifelike golden-colored giant dragon seemed ready to awaken at any moment. This person was precisely Chu Fan, the emperor of the Great Xia Dynasty. This golden-colored robe had been carved during this period of time. At the same time, he wore a golden-colored crown on his head, and the aura emanating from the crown made it difficult for the surrounding cultivators to breathe. Furthermore, a golden-colored longsword was tucked into his waist. This golden-colored longsword was constantly trembling at this moment. It seemed as if it was about to fly out at any time. And a golden-colored battle spear was stuck onto the Qilin war chariot. There was a golden-colored giant dragon on the battle spear. This golden-colored giant dragon seemed as if it was about to awaken. This was the standard configuration for Chu Fan, the emperor of the Great Xia dynasty. As Chu Fan slowly arrived on the altar, 3 golden-colored beams of light quickly appeared on the altar. The next second, a golden-colored Great Seal appeared before Chu Fan. Seeing the golden-colored Great Seal, Chu Fan did not hesitate and immediately picked it up. Beside the golden-colored Great Seal was a golden-colored jade token. The character Chu was carved vividly onto the jade token. As for the item next to the golden-colored jade token, it was a golden-colored Imperial Edict. The aura emanating from this golden-colored Imperial Edict had reached the Quasi-Emperor realm. Even an ordinary strong expert at the Quasi-Emperor realm might be crushed by this golden-colored Imperial Edict. After glancing at these 3 items, Chu Fan slowly turned around and looked at the cultivators and the army below. And right at this moment, hoofbeats sounded again from the rear of the army. Following this, a white Grand Dao instantly paved the entire earth. Then, a palace pulled by immortal horses was seen slowly approaching. These silver-white immortal horses also had a dragon horn growing on their heads. These were the legendary dragon horses. They were also the mounts Chu Fan had given to Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran. As Chu Fan's son and daughter, the 2 of them naturally had to participate in this grand sacrifice to heaven ceremony. As the dragon horses pulling the palace slowly appeared below the altar, everyone's gaze was directed toward the palace pulled by the dragon horses. And now, the dragon horses stopped below the Qilin war chariot. Although they were dragon horses from the heavenly palace, the Qilin could still suppress them. Therefore, they naturally could only stop behind the Qilin war chariot. After the dragon horses stopped, 2 small figures slowly walked out from inside the white jade palace. These 2 small figures were precisely Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran, and at the same time, 2 figures resembling fairies walked out behind them. And these 2 figures were the imperial consorts of the Great Xia dynasty, Qingyao and Luo Tianyi. The 2 of them, one leading Chu Wushuang and the other leading Chu Yanran, slowly approached Chu Fan. Chapter 500 The Celestial Empire Advances, Thunderclouds Arrive. At this moment, the 2 little ones were also extremely quiet. At the same time, Chu Wushuang was wearing a golden robe. Engraved on his golden robe was a 4-clawed dragon. Although this dragon was not as majestic as the one on Chu Fan's body, it was evident, however, that this dragon was extremely noble. As for Chu Yanran, she was wearing a fiery red robe, upon which was carved a lifelike phoenix. The phoenix seemed to have come alive, constantly revolving around her. At the same time, Qingyao and Luo Tianyi were also wearing fiery red robes. Naturally, their robes were very similar to the one Chu Yanran was wearing. However, their robes looked looser and more imposing than Chu Yanran's. Following the arrival of Chu Yanran and Chu Wushuang, everyone present turned their gaze towards their prince and princess. The birth of Chu Yanran and Chu Wushuang had triggered celestial phenomena. Therefore, these cultivators naturally knew how powerful the talents of Chu Yanran and Chu Wushuang were. Subsequently, the 2 little ones quickly arrived beside Chu Fan and stood obediently next to him. Qingyao and Luo Tianyi also stood behind Chu Fan at this time. Following this, a figure slowly descended from the sky. This figure was none other than Heavenly Secret Master. He quickly approached Chu Fan and cupped his hands in greeting. Under Chu Fan's signal, he slowly walked over to the Imperial Edict, picked it up, and then walked slowly to the front. He then looked at the cultivators of Chang'an City in front of him, slowly opened the Imperial Edict, and began to speak. Since the establishment of the Great Xia dynasty, we have annexed the northern, southern, and western regions, and have now completely unified the 4 regions. Therefore, we hereby establish the Great Xia Empire. Today, under the witness of heaven and earth, the Great Xia Empire is established. The content of this Imperial Edict was extremely simple. One could even say that the content of an ordinary Imperial Edict might be more complex than this. However, Chu Fan preferred such simple Imperial Edicts. After Heavenly Secret Master finished reading the content of the Imperial Edict, a golden dragon of luck suddenly appeared in the sky. This gigantic golden dragon of luck seemed to have been summoned, constantly flying toward Chu Fan's direction. Immediately after, it arrived behind Chu Fan, and then circled above Chu Fan's head. The instant this golden dragon of destiny circled above Chu Fan's head, earth-shattering changes began to occur throughout Chang'an City. A terrifying spiritual qi recovery instantly began from beneath Chang'an City. At the same time, Chang'an City was instantly enveloped by a terrifying surge of spiritual qi. At this moment, numerous golden lights continuously merged into the bodies of Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran. This caused the aura around Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran to become incredibly vivid. In just a moment, the aura of Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran had already reached the Dharma aspect realm, yet they were only 2 or 3 years old. Even Chu Tianxiong was decades old when he reached the Dharma aspect realm. Of course, that was only after successfully achieving a breakthrough to the Dharma aspect realm with Chu Fan's help. Yet now Chu Yanran and Chu Wushuang had entered the Dharma aspect realm so easily. After this golden dragon of destiny fully formed, it soared directly into the sky, breaking through the clouds. As the golden dragon of destiny ascended higher and higher, the sky suddenly darkened, as if the entire world was enveloped by a terrifying lightning tribulation. Above Chu Fan's head, numerous thunderclouds instantly appeared. These thunderclouds quickly enveloped his entire being. Seeing this scene, Chu Fan instantly understood. Thus, he instantly tossed out the large seal in his hand, and the golden seal immediately flew towards the golden dragon of destiny in the sky. At the same time, this large seal continuously grew in size, as if it intended to suppress all of space and time. Meanwhile, the golden jade token was constantly spinning, and the character Chu instantly transformed into a beam of golden light, manifesting in the sky. This allowed everyone present to see the enormous golden character Chu in the sky. Moreover, it turned into a golden radiance, enveloping the entire altar. It seemed as if the entire altar was being protected within it. Seeing this scene, Chu Fan instantly transformed into a golden streak of light and rushed into the clouds. In an instant, his entire person vanished from the altar. At this time, everyone raised their heads one after another, gazing at the lightning tribulation in the sky. These thunderclouds in the sky instantly covered the entire land. It was as if all of Chang'an City had fallen into the apocalypse. Even Heavenly Secret Master frowned as he looked at the thunderclouds in the sky. Although other nations also experienced a lightning tribulation when advancing to an empire, those lightning tribulations had never been as terrifying as the current one. Is this the lightning tribulation produced when the possessor of the human emperor fate advances to an imperial dynasty? Heavenly Secret Master slowly raised his head, looked at the lightning tribulation in the sky, and spoke. However, he still held great confidence in Chu Fan. After all, Chu Fan possessed the human emperor fate, and his rate of improvement had far exceeded his imagination. Therefore, Heavenly Secret Master was aware of Chu Fan's strength. At this moment, the common people and cultivators of Chang'an City also directed their gazes towards the thunderclouds in the sky. I hope the emperor can easily pass this lightning tribulation. Only then will our great Xia dynasty become stronger and stronger. The emperor's strength has already reached an unimaginable level, so passing the lightning tribulation in the sky will naturally be easy for him. We just don't know what changes passing the lightning tribulation will bring to our great Xia dynasty. From now on, we will no longer be the great Xia dynasty, but the great Xia empire. So we must remember that we are people of the great Xia empire. If the great Xia dynasty advances to the great Xia empire, this spiritual qi recovery will probably allow our cultivation levels to increase even more, right? I'm truly looking forward to it. Everyone was speaking while looking at the terrifying lightning tribulation in the sky. The cultivators of Chang'an City did not believe that their emperor would fail to pass this lightning tribulation. After all, in the eyes of these cultivators in Chang'an City, their emperor was an invincible existence. Naturally, what they were thinking about at this moment was the benefits they would receive after their emperor advanced the Great Xia dynasty to the Great Xia Empire. Thinking of this, many cultivators had a terrifying excitement in their eyes. Many cultivators were even looking at the thunderclouds in the sky with fervent anticipation in their eyes. Chapter 501 The Tribulation of Lightning condenses ancient and modern emperors. Chu Fan's terrifying battle power. After all, Chu Fan had given them many surprises. It could even be said that the cultivators of the Great Xia dynasty now believed Chu Fan to be an invincible existence. They all believed that Chu Fan would be the true immortal descending to the mortal world, and then successfully lead the Great Xia dynasty to become the only empire in this world. Therefore, the Great Xia dynasty's advancement to the Great Xia Empire was not surprising to them. In fact, the cultivators of the Great Xia dynasty were still wondering what benefits this advancement to the Great Xia Empire would bring them. At this moment, they blindly worshipped Chu Fan, and just as everyone was anticipating Chu Fan's performance, Chu Fan appeared in the center of the thunderclouds. The thunderclouds in the sky were still continuously gathering. The thunderclouds above Chu Fan were also stirring at this moment. It was as if they were ready to strike these thunderclouds onto Chu Fan's body at any moment. Chu Fan naturally saw these continuously gathering lightning tribulations. Then, a faint smile appeared on his lips. The next second, Chu Fan instantly drew the longsword from his waist. This longsword was the Xianyuan sword. Originally, when the system rewarded it, the Xianyuan sword's power had not yet reached this level. However, it had been continuously nourished by the Great Xia Dynasty's national destiny, so now the Xianyuan sword was considered the most powerful weapon below an ultimate emperor weapon. It could even be said that if the Great Xia Dynasty's national destiny was mobilized, the Xianyuan sword could even contend with an ultimate emperor weapon. This was the terrifying aspect of the Xianyuan sword. Moreover, after experiencing this lightning tribulation where the Great Xia Dynasty successfully broke through to the Great Xia Empire, the Xianyuan sword's power would likely become even greater. By then, it would probably directly enter the ultimate emperor weapon realm. After all, the Xianyuan sword was already barely able to reach the level of an ultimate emperor weapon. Then, experiencing this change in the empire could naturally lead to another successful breakthrough. At this moment, the Xianyuan sword also continuously emitted bursts of sword cries, as if responding to Chu Fan. And Chu Fan also had no intention of letting the lightning tribulation in the sky continue to gather. He, holding the Xianyuan sword, charged directly into the lightning tribulation. A terrifying golden light transformed into a golden dragon, directly striking towards the lightning tribulation in the sky. The lightning tribulation in the sky was clearly completely enraged by Chu Fan's action. They continuously made rumbling sounds in the sky. At the same time, a black-purple light instantly gathered in the sky. These lightning tribulations quickly formed a terrifying dragon. This terrifying dragon, with lightning constantly flashing around its body, charged towards Chu Fan. The next second, this lightning dragon directly collided with the golden dragon in the sky. At the moment of impact, both the lightning dragon and the golden dragon simultaneously vanished, and two terrifying forces instantly spread out in the surroundings. Seeing this scene, Chu Fan naturally used the Xianyuan sword in his hand to block this spreading wave. He once again struck out with the sword. The next second, a golden sword light instantly tore through the surrounding space. At the same time, it directly split the thunderclouds in front of him into two halves. Of course, the thunderclouds that were split into two quickly gathered back together. Then, continuous rumbling sounds came from the sky. It was as if the thunder between heaven and earth had also been completely enraged by Chu Fan. Then, these thunderclouds instantly transformed into one terrifying light after another, and these lights quickly formed one human figure after another. Moreover, the chi emanating from each of these figures had reached a terrifying level. The chi emanating from each human figure had reached the great sage perfection realm, and more importantly, they carried an invincible aura, as if they were the invincible ones of every era. Seeing this scene, a look of excitement also appeared in Chu Fan's eyes. Then, holding the Xianyuan sword, he charged directly towards these human figures. As Chu Fan charged out with the Xianyuan sword, the human figures in the sky also began to move. One of them, holding a long sword, charged towards Chu Fan with a terrifying battle intent in his eyes. The long sword in his hand also emitted terrifying green light. Then, two terrifying lights collided. At this moment, Chu Fan was also an invincible existence among those of the same realm. So, in this intense collision, Chu Fan only retreated a few hundred steps, while the human figure in front of him instantly transformed into a ray of light, appearing tens of thousands of meters behind the thunderclouds. After seeing this scene, another human figure once again moved towards Chu Fan. This human figure was holding a purple long saber, and a terrifying saber intent emanated from the purple long saber at this moment. This saber intent seemed to want to cleave the entire sky apart. Seeing this scene, an amused smile instantly appeared on Chu Fan's face. I didn't expect to meet the great emperor-level founder of Tianxian Holy Land here. Let me see what capabilities you truly possess. Then, Chu Fan looked at the middle-aged man holding a purple long saber in front of him with a hint of excitement in his eyes. Perhaps because of the formation of the lightning tribulation, Chu Fan could not clearly see the specific appearance of this middle-aged man at this moment. However, he knew that the age of this figure was roughly in the state of a middle-aged man. And this figure also directly struck a saber towards Chu Fan. The next second, a terrifying light instantly enveloped the entire sky. A purple saber light directly struck down from the sky, as if to completely cleave this world apart. At this moment, even the terrifying thunderclouds in the sky could not encompass this saber strike. Seeing this scene, Chu Fan, with excitement on his face, raised the Xianyuan sword in his hand and struck a sword towards the sky. The next second, a golden dragon instantly flew out from behind Chu Fan. This golden dragon instantly charged towards the purple saber light in the sky. The next second, the two terrifying attacks collided. At the moment of impact, the golden dragon instantly completely crushed the purple saber light. At the same time, the terrifying power on its body did not diminish at all and directly charged towards the human figure. Seeing this scene, the human figure quickly struck out another saber. The next second, a purple light once again appeared in front of him. However, this purple light was clearly unable to withstand the attack of the golden dragon. So, the golden dragon directly broke through this purple saber light, and then, with undiminished power, it directly collided with this human figure. The next second, this human figure directly dissipated between heaven and earth. Although this purple figure was a former great emperor-level expert, he was, after all, summoned by the lightning tribulation, and he was also a great emperor-level expert who had not yet fully matured. Therefore, it was naturally impossible for him to be Chu Fan's opponent.